Mountains like Everest give you an excuse to give up every single moment. Nothing is going to go according to plan up there. A lot of people can't deal with that. Of course, physical training is needed. Of course, the high altitude training is needed. But if you don't have the mindset, you're not going to last out there.
Wasfia Nazreen is a trailblazing force of nature.
Patience is the biggest thing that you need up there. Like Mother Earth can just toss you out in a fraction of a second. I've seen it over and over. I've seen earthquakes, avalanches, anything and everything that you knew could be gone in a fraction of a second.
The first Bengali and the only Bangladeshi to summit K2 and the 7 summits, Wasfia is a National Geographic explorer, recognized as one of the most adventurous women of the last 25 years, who has shattered countless records and stereotypes as both a mountaineer and an activist.
We all come here for a very short time, and we must make this a very purposeful time. Don't ruin it.
As much as Wasfia's feats are extraordinary, it's her backstory that's even more remarkable. It's one of courage, it's one that's marked with resilience, and just unbelievable fortitude in the face of almost unspeakable hardship. It's also deeply spiritual in nature, and one that has been heavily influenced by her very special friendship with His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. And it's one I'm deeply honored to share with you today.
Whatever circumstances we're in, we're all suffering and we're all climbing our own mountains. But there is no mountain high enough for us to climb. If I could do everything that I've done from the background that I came from, anything is possible.
Today's episode is brought to you by the awesome organizations that make this show possible. Super nice to meet you. Delighted to have you here. And as I was wrapping my head around your story and digging deeper into who you are, what struck me beyond your accomplishments, which are certainly impressive, is really the story behind it, which I think is even more extraordinary. We're going to talk about the summits and all these amazing things that you've done, but I'm really interested in the depth of that experience and the experiences that you had, the formative experiences that kind of led to these accomplishments, which are really just external manifestations of this interior journey that you've been on.
Climbing our inner mountains.
Yes, that's right.
It's an honor.
The metaphysical mountains.
Thank you for having me, first of all. I've been looking up to you for many years, and it's a real honor. And I think this is karma too, how we got connected and all that. Real pleasure to be here today.
Excellent. Maybe we should just start at the beginning, growing up in Bangladesh. Paint a picture of what that was like. I mean, we all know of Bangladesh, but I think at least in the Western world, there's a lot of confusion or misunderstanding or an incomplete understanding of what that experience must have been like for you.
So people who might even not know where Bangladesh is, it's on the left side on the map of India. And during my parents' generation, so pretty recent, what is now Bangladesh, Pakistan, and India used to be one country. So 1971 was when Bangladesh Liberation War happened, and I was born in the first generation as a Bangladeshi. And I paint that picture first because we grew up with a lot of stories. Every single person that I know growing up, were rebels, like freedom fighters. I think that was very instrumental in the foundation aspect of it and teaching me how to stand up for myself. But personally speaking, my parents, and this is a long story, so I'm going to make it short. So, I was born to a musician, mom, and she's also a school teacher. And my father worked in the ships in Bay of Bengal, which is the largest delta in the world. And near that delta is the Sundarbans, which is the largest mangrove forest in the world, where the Bengal tigers are from. So because of my dad's work, I guess the fact that I was literally in touch with nature from the very beginning. And this is a region in the world where cyclones, floods, I still remember growing up, make fun of Americans freaking out over a storm. And we're going through the worst cyclones. And I've seen stuff from the earliest that I can remember. Like nature, we just knew nature was the God, regardless of which religion we came from. And I grew up in a very secular community. My mom, predominantly Bangladesh is Muslim, but it's a very secular Islam. Our whole constitute, like when Bangladesh, what is now Bangladesh and Pakistan separated, we were East Pakistan. And what is now Pakistan was West Pakistan, with India in the middle, which was already independent. So we have our language, Bengali, mother tongue. When Pakistani government, basically, our army, made Bengalis speak in Urdu, which is their language. And this is when hundreds and thousands of my parents' generation students came out when they brush fired. And that day was 21st February, based on which the International Mother Language Day was formed. Anyway, these are just little stories to say that we grew up with this. And then at the age of 13, one fine day, I found out that my mom left the house. That's all I knew. We didn't know if she was going to come back. I was hoping she would. But it was kind of, because it was such a small town where we were living, we call this cities, but they're very kind of like a rural city. And she was the teacher in my school. And it was such a scandal that I just stopped going to school. And my father was at work the whole time. My brother was out.
And you were how old? 13?
12 going into 13. And so I had nobody. And so after being absent in school for almost 9 months and just being on my own, I wrote or called an aunt in Dhaka, which is the capital of the country, and saying that, I asked my father first because he had no choice. He had to work. He had to be in the ships. So we took a decision together that it's probably best for me to move with her. And then I requested her, can you please put me in an English medium school? So till that age, I didn't know how to speak English. So in our country, we have two modes of schooling. One is English and one is Bengali. So I moved to Dhaka city, and from the age of 13 to 18, I went through rigorous discipline because I knew the only ticket out is my education. Because if I could educate myself and provide for myself, then I can cut through this. At that time, there was this whole pressure of who the hell is going to marry this girl? She has her mom's shame.
Right. So your mom splits, your parents get divorced, they ultimately go and create new families. You're left betwixt and in between with nowhere to go. You end up with your aunt in this English-speaking school, and you start, you're an athlete, you're playing volleyball and handball, but you're also doing theater, you're kind of an artistic, but also athletic kid at the same time. But I would imagine having a bit of an identity crisis, trying to understand, how you ended up in this place, while at the same time having a deep understanding of how important education is going to be in terms of your trajectory, because Bangladesh isn't exactly getting an A+ on the women's rights, report card, right? So talk a little bit about what it's like for a young woman growing up in Bangladesh in terms of access to opportunity and being upwardly mobile.
To be frank, at that time, that period was just survival for me. I didn't think of these things logically. I was just doing to just survive and get the hell out of there. So for example, I went to that school, but then as soon as I was in the school, in my mind, I was like, okay, I have heard of my older cousins be out, going for study abroads. And so I need to get the hell out of here. So I was aiming, even without telling my aunts, that at the age of 18, as soon as I graduate, I'm going to apply to colleges and that's my ticket out. Because I knew that if I stayed in Bangladesh, I would not be able to choose life as I wanted for myself. Also, I think that one incident, just to give context, every other aunt of mine was married off as a teenager. So that I'm the next generation. So
in arranged marriages.
Majority, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I have one aunt from my dad's side who had a love marriage, but on my mom's side was arranged. So before my mom left, I was the most timid, silent kid. I did nothing. I would walk and follow. Like I was clumsy. I was very vulnerable. That one incident overnight made me completely opposite spectrum. It's like, I need to stand up for myself. I don't want to end up like her. I don't want to end up like any of my aunts. So when I started applying for colleges, I went to my dad for money. And then my stepmom told me that they had only enough money for the son, which was her son. Which wasn't true, first of all. But I was so pissed off with that one answer. I went back, and this one college in Decatur, Georgia, gave me 100% scholarship. I wrote to an uncle who lived in London at that time, my father's older brother, for enough money for the ticket. And I think he gave me a few $100 extra, sent me a few $100 extra, and then that was it. I bought a ticket, came to Decatur, Georgia, thinking it was going to be like New York because that's all I knew. And then I landed.
That must have been quite shocking.
I was,
in terms of a cultural shift.
Can you imagine as an 18-year-old good girl from Bangladesh arriving in America thinking she was coming to New York.
In the South.
And then Decatur, Georgia was very different back then. Within my first semester, I almost got gang raped. There was like in the middle of violence, and I was like, holy shit, where did I come?
Wow.
And then I applied right away for study abroad, and I got into another college in Scotland. Mm-hmm. And I left for 6 months and ended up staying in Scotland through my college, Agnes Scott College in Decatur, Georgia, who was paying for it. And I kept extending it. 6 months went into a year, into 2 years, till Agnes Scott wrote and saying, hey, if you want to graduate with a degree from our college, you need to return. So then I came back. And then by that time, Atlanta had changed a little bit. And then during my final year, I got another grant to go to India to study how women were using art as therapy, because I was double majoring in studio art and psychology at that time. And that is the trip that changed my entire life.
Yeah. You're a survivor. Like you figured all that out on your own without any kind of like help or support.
Past karma.
Yeah. But this call to activism, was that always part of your kind of internal makeup? Like this sense that the first thing you wanted to do when you finished university was go to India and
I hadn't even finished university.
You hadn't yet. You were
in
still
my senior year. Yeah, I actually never came back for my graduation.
Oh, you didn't?
No,
you did graduate. You just didn't go through the
ceremony.
Yeah. So you end up in India.
So I go to India, and we had I think 12 to 16 regions or locations we had to go, and Dharamsala was the last in that. I had no idea about Dharamsala. This is I wouldn't say pre-internet, but this is when you had to learn typing with those Macintosh computers. Right. There was no Instagram or anything. So I end up in Dharamsala. There was this group of Tibetan, the fact that Tibetans even lived in India, I was not familiar with it. So this group of women, some of whom were former prisoners in Chinese prisons, both lay practitioners and nuns, they had by foot came out of Tibet. You've been to Dharamsala, and I have so many questions about that. But in Dharamsala, on the main road parallel to the temple road, there's the refugee center. That's like one of the main places where refugees come in when they cross the Himalayas. And the second place is Nepal. So these women, you were using many practices. One practice is called Tonglen, which is the whole act of taking in your enemy or perceived enemy's karma, negative karma, and sending out your merits to them. And these women were sitting and radiating the type of glow that I had never seen. And I still remember, like, I wanted to be them because I thought I had it wrong. And I was in a very negative space. This was kind of like where if these women didn't come at that time, I don't know if I would be alive, because I was really contemplating that kind of like, okay, I had no father to look up to, mother to look up to, no older brother to look up to. I have no role models. I struggled so much through college trying to, just struggling. And then I thought I had it wrong. But look at these people. They've lost their motherland. They've lost their holy places. They've been stripped naked, taken their nuns and monks' vows of made to do things, and all of them physically brutalized. Some of the women were sterilized. But they didn't have 1 inch of hate towards their so-called enemies. And it was so freeing just witnessing that joy. And I was bawling my eyes out throughout the whole time. And these women are sitting in their full power, just. So on the way back on that flight out, I took the bus from Dharamsala to Delhi. And in that flight back from Delhi to Atlanta I just knew instinctively I have to go back. I don't know what is there, but I remember my professor and at that time, and my dean was like, "You're in your elements. I have never seen you like this." And then I came back. This is post 9/11. International students were having a very hard time getting work permit. And my name sounds very Muslim, but I had a work permit. I had a confirmed job in San Francisco that I was going to go to after graduation. But in that trip back, in that flight back, I decided, hell no. And I came back, had a yard sale, just about enough money to buy a ticket back to India, Delhi. And I did that. And then the embassy informed me that I had to go back to Bangladesh to return my work permit, because you cannot go around the world with a valid work permit if you're not working in the US. So I had to go back to Bangladesh first, go to American embassy. And I still remember the guy was like, "Are you sure?" He asked me thrice. And I had to say every time, "Yes, yes." So he refused it without prejudice. You have to just put a stamp on it. And then I took a flight out to Delhi and moved to Dharamsala and ended up living there 7 years on.
7 years. And you just showed up without any idea of how this was all going to work.
Yeah, and I had $250 in my pocket.
And it was those women. I mean, what was, can you explain a little bit more about what that pull was all about and why you felt so strongly about returning?
I think whole growing up, I never felt like I fit in. And when I arrived in Dharamsala for the first time, I felt everyone I knew and everything I knew. I didn't at that time, I couldn't understand Tibetan, but Tibetan was more familiar to my ears. And like we say now, it's all past karma.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's just some past life thing.
Yeah, I've had so many past lives, so many past lives in Tibet. Anyway, but at that time, as soon as I moved to Dharamsala, not having any guarantee of if I gonna ever get a work here, can I stay? Within the first week, I got a job offer. Within less than 2 months, I met. I'll get into all that.
Yeah. But you like as a journalist, right? That was the job that you got? Yeah, so the
first paid job, because there's a lot of work you can do in Dharamsala. A lot of it is volunteer work. And I was volunteering with several nonprofits, all related to human rights work with Tibetans. So the group of women that I met was through this organization called Guchusam. It's an ex-prisoners organization. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you passed through it. There are only 2 main roads in Dharamsala. But Payul, which means motherland in Tibetan, is the news archive that was, especially at that time, because it was pre-Olympic Games, which happened in 2008. It was way before that. But getting right information from inside Tibet it's a big deal because of the way the Communist Party controls news and everything. So my job was to basically the informer I had a pseudonym. All my publication during that was under a pseudonym. So I was the informer going inside Tibet, out Nepal, all over, wherever Tibetans lived, refugees or inside Tibet. And I was the special correspondent for Dharamsala. So the most famous person in Dharamsala is, of course, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and that's the main
perhaps
news
the most
cover.
famous person in the world.
Yeah. So,
and he lives in this little village. Dharamsala is sort of, it's not like some booming metropolis. It's a tiny little mountaintop village.
Well, it's grown so much now. Mm-hmm. When I lived there was none of these bars and the fancy resorts, and it's crazy how much development that has happened.
Yeah,
but
that's all tiny. To accommodate all the people that pilgrimage there to visit with him. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then when Payul, I was working with it, and then I would meet. You're familiar with the temple, right? Right in front of His Holiness's house. So he would come walk from the house to the temple, and during that walking time, there were many times he would just, within thousands of people, just straight look to me and wave. And there was always a direct darshan. And sometimes my Tibetan journalists would put me in the front because he paid so much attention to me just to get that shot and use me as the bait. And so I was just happy with that. And also now I look back and I realize that just being around him brought so much healing, just the light and the touches, they were instrumental during that time. And then for my healing, at least. And then one day I'm getting ready to go to work super early. I get a phone call that, we didn't have smartphones then. I don't recognize the number. And I say, hello. I said, Miss Nazreen. No one calls me Miss Nazreen. So I knew it was an official call. So I said, yes. She's like, oh, I'm calling from Holiness's office. At some point, did you express meeting him? I said, of course. I said, do you still want to meet him? And then I was like, this is a prank call. Because who's going to call and ask if you want to meet the Dalai Lama? I said, of course, I still want to meet him. He said, oh, can you come now? And I'm like, shit. I was in Upper Dharamsala, my home at that time, near Tipa. Mm-hmm. You've been to Tipa, I think, the cultural center. And it was pouring raining outside. So I had to get from Tipa to there. And I know His Holiness was super particular. If he says 8, he's there at 7:59. So I was just rushing while still holding the phone to get a sari. This is supposed to be the first meeting, and I had only 30 minutes left to go meet him. So I went, and that was my first meeting, and he was waiting there. I think it was sharp at 8, that meeting. I was barely 21 at that time. Why do you think that he felt compelled to reach out to you?
I think he heard of me from his brother. Who I had worked with earlier, or not worked with, just knew through Payul. He heard that there was a Bangladeshi woman in town who's working for Tibetan human rights. That's why he called me. But when I met him and had the first meeting, and before I was leaving the first day, there are several exchanges that happened. But when I look back now, that was my first teaching on karma. I was in my mind thinking, wow, just last week I checked out this spot where I could fall from. I was looking at locations, but I was kind of scared, oh, that's going to hurt. Maybe I'm not going to be able to leave. What if I get paralyzed for the rest of my life?
You mean you were exploring some self-harm options? Like that's the mental and emotional state that you were in?
And as that thought came into my mind, His Holiness looked at me and just said, my old friend, we're all here because of our karma. And I don't know if you've heard his laughter yet, but a lot happens during that laughter. And it was like a thunder that just struck me on my chest. And then the next line was, you have a precious human birth, which is the first concept, which I didn't know in Tibetan studies, like to value how long it took us to come to this human form. We have 6 realms of existence. And the human realm is the most, how to say it, human realm is the only realm where we can ascend into enlightenment. There are humans who are living in the God realm, like they have no. A lot of people in Hollywood are in the God realm. They have no, they have endless money, everything that you need in this world to survive. But they're so, like their desire is so much with it and they're enjoying it so much is that they're not going to work towards, they don't have enough obstacles to work to transform them and seek enlightenment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah, so yeah, he told me that, and then went back to he has a small office inside the main room, and then brought me in there and then gave me my first amulet. That I have many amulets from him. That was the first. He said, "You're going to be needing this one." I didn't understand what he meant at that time. And that amulet is related to, in the Tibetan text, there's a lot of deities. And technically, they're all energies or avatars within our own selves. Palden Lamo is the protectress of Tibet, and Dalai Lama, that's his principal protectress, a feminine entity, very wrathful. So he gave me the protection amulet related to Palden Lamo and taught me the text that I'm supposed to read. This is like all in the first meeting, first of all. And I'm trying to wrap my head around everything. I'm so young. And he gives this, and so then instructs his assistant to give me the prayer to call her in, and said, "You're going to be needing that." And then he sent me off. And then since then, I mean, I don't remember how many times I've met him, but
the inference that you're making about this first meeting is that on some level he had an awareness of what you were going through and felt like he could be a benefit to you in salving this wound.
Perhaps, but also one specific thing that he said is like, you're here because we have karma. I mean, he didn't say we have karma. He said because of your own karma. And so karma, which we can extend into later, but I feel like the first few years of this life, none of it is karma from this life. Like the connection I have with, let's say, Dalai Lama or any other Tibetan teachers, that didn't come from this life. It's accumulated karma from many, many, many past lives. That's why he called me as his old friend when I walked in. I think it was needed for me to meet him at that time the way I met him. And he could see that this woman, somehow I need to detour her from this, because I was going back to my past and I was not willing to leave Dharamsala. And I was so heavily involved in Free Tibet. And this, when I shared the later stories, like he would constantly call me and just say, this is not your fight. And I would be like, no, I'm freeing Tibet this lifetime. You don't understand, Kundun. We refer to him as Kundun, which means the one with the presence. And in my mind, I would be like, I'm like, what? He can't appreciate that I'm serving his cause? Like, I've never met a leader who's like removing me from his cause. But he saw the danger that I was going to get into. And to be very frank, like he's the one who brought me to the mountains. I had no goal to be a mountaineer.
He was the one who said, your path is in the mountains, and it's not with freeing Tibet. It's more to do with the mountains and also the women of Bangladesh. Like he sort of tuned your compass to that.
Yeah, but I was fighting with him. Even when he said, you're supposed to be leading the women of Bangladesh, I was like, what? I'm freeing Tibet.
I like that you were mixing it up with him and pushing back on him.
Yeah.
But you developed this like pretty deep relationship. Like it was a mentorship that went on for many years. I mean, you became, from what I gather, now, pretty close with him, yes? 20
plus years now. But a lot of, I mean, Holiness was much more active before. Now he's almost 90. So he can't give that much time. And I haven't seen him for a long time. But whatever mountain I'm on, even when I was on K2, I got a message that, blessing was there. And every single mountain in life that I've climbed, Holiness was behind it. So I have 3 more teachers that are in the Tibetan world. I'll mention their names just in case someone recognizes. So Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, who's a very prominent teacher Tibetan teacher. He was a lay practitioner. And I share this because I think a lot of people put Tibetans as like, oh, only a monk can do this or a nun can do this. What the teachings of Buddha is for all humans. And the fact that lay people can do it you can be a rock star and you can still reach enlightenment. That's a weird
Might
example.
Might be a little harder, but yeah.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that the techniques work for any human mind. Buddha was a scientist. He was a medicine man. He figured out the mind and taught 84,000 techniques for different kind of mindsets. Right. So we were talking about Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, and he was Dalai Lama's teacher. So right now we have the next incarnation of Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, who's slightly younger than me. But he shapeshifts between the previous and this one. Why I mention him is when His Holiness leaves this incarnation, Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche alongside several other lamas will be holding the region because the teacher can identify the student. So the next recognition of the 15th Dalai Lama, if he chooses to come back, which he will, hopefully, because the next one is going to be very complicated because Chinese government is going to choose their own
political.
Dalai Lama. Yeah,
and Mongolia also is sort of involved in that discourse.
I mean, it's God knows what kind of shit show is going to happen.
I know.
So someone's going to have to hold it down. So, like this amulet was made by Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche's, which was my main protection for K2. But no. So just to say that even if I don't have a direct talking relationship with him being so far away, our minds are always connected. I know that and he says that all the time because in the first few years, I got very clingy to my teachers, not having any kind of family role models. And then you get these like powerful teachers. So they were the whole time trying to send me away, and this is one thing that as someone who's practiced or like during my college years, I've tried out every single faith just to from Baha'is to Christian mysticism to mystic Judaism and everything. I just wanted to learn. And what really appealed to me is there is no, or at least how Tibetan Buddhists teach it, is ultimately you are your own guru. Yes, we have a teacher, guru meaning teacher, teacher-student oral tradition from Buddha's time, but ultimately you'd learn from us and then find your own guru. The power is within you. Pretty much Star Wars, which was based out of Tibetans. George Lucas actually went and spent 6 months in Dharamsala and came up with Star Wars.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, Yoda is one of Holiness's teacher. I'll send you the article.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
And
it's not surprising, though.
You know the part in the Ewok village? Gunda.
Yeah.
If you hear it, it's rewind. How do you say it? Like Tibetan talking, and then he put it back in reverse.
Played backwards. Oh, wow. Oh, so it's it's encoded.
Everything that you see in Star Wars was taken from the Tibetan pantheon, the oracles. There's a whole living tradition of oracles in Tibetan diaspora. They're what is the other one? And within the oracles, there are different kind of, there's a female. There's only 3 living oracles right now. Back in Tibet's blooming time, there were so many flying oracles, all types of oracles. Have you met the oracle in Dharamsala, the female one? That's a whole another realm. There are shapeshifters of all kinds.
Maybe I did and I didn't know it.
Maybe.
Yeah. Welcome to my sleep sanctuary. Come on in. So the defining characteristic of this space is my pride and joy, which is the 8 sleep system. You can see this unit here. There is a pad that goes on my mattress that allows me to temperature control my sleep environment. Over time, the 8 sleep system learns what is optimal in terms of ensuring the best night of sleep and makes suggestions about temperature tweaks to give you a better night's rest. And since I've had the 8 sleep system, my sleep quality has been enhanced by a tremendous factor, and it's improved all aspects of my lived experience. If you want to transform your sleep, your energy levels, and overall performance, get the Pod 4 Ultra. So here's what you're going to do. To get $350 off the Pod 4 Ultra, visit 8sleep.com/richroll or simply hit the link in the description below. I appreciate this idea that we're not to deify the guru, right?
Yeah.
Like it's about empowerment and a transmission of teachings and wisdom, but not for the sake of advancing the interest of the guru, but in empowering the individual to go on their own journey with what's been transmitted to that person.
Yeah, and that every individual we all have our own specific karma. I live in LA and often see bumper stickers that says karma is a bitch. But I feel like here people only talk about karma when it comes to negative stuff. But this too is karma. The positive, the negative, the neutral. Karma, the word means action. And all actions start so we have body, speech, and mind action. Things we do physically, things we say through our speech, and then things that arise in our mind. The most important is what arises, because the first two depends on what arrives in the mind.
Mm-hmm.
And all of it, from time immemorial, since our souls have existed, is being recorded in kind of like a database like iCloud or Google Plus, whatever you use, like infinite. There's no unlimited capacity. But the Tibetan word for mind, for example, is not mind, it's mind continuum, because the karma is every instant. I could be talking to you right now very pleasantly and have very negative thoughts about, oh yeah, your t-shirt looks ugly, or da-da-da. I'm creating negative karma even if and it's moment to moment, and it's constantly being recorded. And when we die, our root mind, which remains in our heart chakra, so the brain is the cognitive mind, and the soul's mind, which we call the root mind, is here. And only that, let's say it's like a chip that just, like a light chip that passes away with that information. And then whichever body we go to, that's what's passed on.
I don't know if it's karma or divine timing, but there's something interesting about the fact that you're here today, right now. I mean, even the timing of it is extra fascinating to me, because I am right now in a moment of reflection and sort of deep inner work that was catalyzed by my experience visiting the Dalai Lama 6 weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
And is also related to some of the inner work that you've done. So going to Dharamsala, spending time with him, having the opportunity to receive darshan and his wisdom in a very structured kind of environment. Arthur Brooks was hosting it, and he had a series of questions and a sort of arc of experience he wanted to take our group on. But as you know, the Dalai Lama doesn't necessarily play ball with that. Like, he's going to tell you what he wants to tell you, or what he thinks that you need to hear or are capable of hearing. And over the course of these 2 days, pretty much without fail, his response to almost every question that was asked of him was the same. Like, it was the same answer, which all tracked back to, love and compassion, of course, but also this idea of the mother's love for the child. And I'm sure there's a version of that transmission that you've probably received many times. And I'm curious about not only on a higher level, like what you learned from all the time that you've spent with him and what you've taken away from that, but also how this relationship that you have with him has informed how you've navigated your own healing over the trauma of being abandoned by your mother. So when he says, when you're challenged to feel love or connect with love or to receive love or to give love, reflect upon the mother's love for a child. I'm sure when you, at least at that time, were in a position of reflecting on the mother's love for a child, all that would produce for you is pain.
And it did.
Yeah. So it's like, what am I supposed to do with that? Like that, it's the opposite of what he's trying to tell you, because you have this you have this experience that is blocking you from being able to kind of embrace that message.
I remember his face when I snapped. Like he said something very similar, like all women are mothers and mothers love, because he has had a beautiful mother-loving relationship with his mother.
His thing with his mom is like intense, right?
So he shared that with me, and he said, and this is before I actually told him that what happened to me, and I could feel like, because I'm on Mars, but my ruling planet is Mars. I'm fire. So it was my biggest thing that I had to get rid of, my anger. Like if you met me in my 20s and late 20s at least, I was a different being. I couldn't control the anger within me, different version of anger, the whole spectrum. And then he was very shocked to hear after that. And he just went, as these Tibetans do this all the time to express disapproval. Like, and then... was it that meeting? No, it was a different meeting when he said, but your real mother is Mother Nature, no? And at that time, I had already gone back to Nepal to climb some like smaller mountains, which are in Nepal, 5,000, 6,000 meter peaks, which is also a blessing for me. Like I, by default, started in the Himalayas, which is unusual for other mountaineers' career where they end up.
Yeah, they go to the Himalayas after they put their time in with a lot of other mountains.
But by default, I started there. So I realized on my own that nature, just being in this pilgrimages, because climbing, because I learned from Tibetans and Sherpas, it's a very different approach how we climb a mountain. We never go without seeking permission from the mountains. But throughout those process of taking these long journeys in the mountains, I could see that how I was healing. It was really like a healing pilgrimage for me, every single mountain. And so at one point he did instruct me to think of like good memories from both my parents. And I really struggled at that time to think of anything good, positive with my mom. Now I can, but at that time I couldn't see anything. And then at that time with my father, I had a lot of positive memories and I shared that. And then so he was, just encouraging me to reflect on that during analytical meditation and really give birth to gratitude. Because this is a time when I forgot how to smile. Like I was dead inside. And Holiness has done so much things for me, but one of the best things that he's done is made me realize that I can laugh even during my hardest struggles. And this freed me up. And I can't technically explain how he did it, but like the reason why I make fun of all my tragedies today with an open heart, and it's because he showed me the way. Anyway, so over the months, I was going back and forth. Usually it was because of work, but he would ask on how I was doing with those kind of meditation. And I kept telling him like nothing is coming up with my mom. And then he just kneeled and politely said, but she carried you in her womb for 9 months, no? And as he was saying it, I saw myself as a fetus, like baby. And so I went back and I would just it was tough at that time because my body was reacting. But to really so he told me to start at short times and then create a habit every day, even if it's for a minute. So I went step by step, thinking of myself as a baby in her womb, thanking her for everything. But it took years for me to really free from, sending them gratitude for the life they've brought me in. Whereas right before that, before meeting Holiness, like, why did you bring me into this life when you couldn't take care of me? And so it was just, again, polar opposite perspective.
Do you feel like you've healed that wound?
With my mom?
Yeah.
I feel so. She's still alive. When I reached the summit of Chomolungma, Everest, at the age of 29, she was the first person I called to thank. She didn't pick up. It was 6:26 a.m. to be fair. But just because not taking away anything from what she's done. I'm not saying it's okay what she's done, and there's a lot more into it, which the details of which will be in my memoir, but I am so happy she did what she did, because if she hadn't left, it wouldn't have created the domino effect of series of events that I had to go through, and not make me, I don't think I would be who I am today, because if she hadn't left exactly how she left.
Yeah, there is a perspective that she is perhaps your greatest teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah, and developing gratitude and appreciation for that in light of everything that happened, and this, story that has, led to so much pain and hurt, right? To be able to transcend that is a beautiful thing.
It's beautiful, and I kind of lived with that till I almost died in COVID, and it reappeared. And we can get into that later.
Yeah, we're going to work up. We're going to work up to that. Meaning, it flared up, and you realized there was still work you had to do around that.
No, because she came back into my life for a different reason, and it was a lot of things just came up.
Things got messy.
Yeah. Well, when I came down Everest, both sides of my family were fighting on who to take credit, and there's a specific point in Khumbu Icefall where I stood and I looked back towards the summit, and because my satellite phone was beeping with all the news of what was happening in Bangladesh. My stepmom at that time was in the front page of every newspaper.
So these people that essentially abandoned you were suddenly showing up to take credit for everything that you had done. Yeah. That's the comedy of the human condition. Had
I known climbing one mountain would change so many things for me, then I would have probably strategized climbing that mountain much earlier. But no, it's not just parents. I had more relatives appear in my life that I hadn't even known of. Everyone came back into my life, and we can talk about that later.
Yeah. What is the essence of what you learned from your time with the Dalai Lama? Like, if you could condense it down into a few pearls of wisdom that have been instructive, informative for you.
Oh my God, this is I could write a whole book on that. But I would say transforming obstacles into opportunities. Lesson number one. And the concepts of karma. Like, once my first teaching of karma started at the age of 21. And throughout my entire 20s, I would get a lot of, this is like a very young mind to comprehend such vast teachings, right? And a lot of the teachings that he gave me on karma in my 20s, I only absorbed it after moving to LA in my late 30s. And so, because when you're next to the teaching itself, not that I took it for granted, but it was so much in a very short time. It was so much that was passed on to me that I wasn't fully able to digest it, see it. And
well, you have to, sort of leave the metaphorical cave and go live your life.
Exactly.
And when things come up, that's when you have the opportunity to practice those ideas, right? Otherwise, it's just theory.
Yeah.
If you stay in Dharamsala.
Yeah,
and immunize yourself from those kinds of life experiences.
They sent me to the hub of samsara that is Los Angeles.
I know, you're here, right? It's all going to come up, right? Plenty of opportunity to practice.
I also, it did resurface a lot of things, because for once I was out of, whether it's Bangladesh or the place that I got sick, and becoming a national figure in Bangladesh, life got really messy for me. And I couldn't heal in that environment. So for me to take this distance, and also finding so many different practitioners or healers in this city, that was life-changing for me. So I know that even though I struggled the first few years of being here, in terms of work and finding my community, and just it's a huge city, it's hard to fit in here from a place I always lived in small towns, Kathmandu, the entire city I know by heart. Dharamsala, it's not even a small town. It's, what would you call it? You called it a village.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tiny place.
Yeah, I'm used to that kind of place. So that's why I live in Venice, because I know the 2 mile by 2 mile route. That kind of is
and it is kind of its own thing there. Yeah.
But it's a bubble. And I realize every time I leave LA how bougie and how pampered we are in this world. This is so cushioned,
For sure. I mean, there's no question about it. When you're in Dharamsala, I mean, if you go anywhere in India, I mean, it's such a mind fuck because it's like traveling to a different planet, as somebody who's lived in Los Angeles for a long time. And you can't help but have a different perspective on, just how much we have and also how different our relationship is with spirituality and perhaps like what's most important. Because when you spend time with people who have nothing and are more joyful than most of the people that you encounter in the Western world, you can't help but, sort of begin to deconstruct like, the priorities of life.
I was also like, it was eye-opening for me to see how many people who I used to look up, whether they're A-listers or like big names, they're really suffering, man. Like people are really suffering in this town. And I still don't understand why you have so much money, everything basically. Everyone has so much resources here, but still can be so unhappy.
Well, it's, they're trying to stuff the God-shaped hole with all of those things. And the more you do it and it doesn't like deliver on that implicit promise, the more suffering you're going to reap upon yourself, right? Until you have a reckoning and you decide that you're going to approach your life differently. And, that's an affliction of, the Western way of doing things and all of the messaging that, we kind of absorb every single day, as long as we can remember, that tells us that the path to happiness is built on this path of accumulation and, power, property, and prestige. And this is a town where there's a lot of people that have a lot of those things, but what they're missing is any kind of, relationship with faith and spirituality, relationship with other human beings that they care about, like all of these things that we know are integral to living a meaningful, happy life, but they become deprioritized for the sake of, these other kind of goals. And, that's what's producing all of the pain and suffering, I think, for too many people. And it's just writ large in this town because of just the nature of the business here, et cetera. Yeah. When you're in Dharamsala, though, you're nestled up against the Himalayas. You can see these snow-capped mountains. It's quite beautiful. But what you might not immediately understand or appreciate is that those are just that's just the first range. Like these are tiny foothills. Yeah. Like the real Himalayan peaks are like two ranges behind that you can't even see. And those mountains that you see from the village, you're like, wow, those are huge mountains. Those are nothing compared to the mountains that you've climbed. And the culture just is, you said like climbers and mountaineers have to work their way up to, climbing the Himalayas, but people in northern India, they're just out on those mountains all the time. So it's not surprising that you found it sort of natural to begin there and, did it through like, joining those people.
Yeah. Every time in Nepal, have you been to Nepal yet?
No.
I gotta go.
I've only been to India that one time.
Wow. Well, Nepal's next because
all right.
That's a whole level of like so much spirituality just in one place, and it's buzzing. I think you're going to love it. And also you need to go to Everest at some point.
I don't know if I need to do that.
No, you don't.
There's too many people up there already.
No, we go in a season when that shit show is not happening. I never take people up there anymore during spring season. Anyway, but when I was going to Nepal, because Tibetan, the second biggest, largest refugee community is based in Nepal, because that's another route to come in from Tibet. All my colleagues that I was working with happened to be just outdoorsy mountain people. So it literally was like, hey, like over the weekend, you go for a pub or drink. We didn't have that back then. Let's go to the mountains. So it was just, I was friends with Sherpa people. Sherpa, originally, like Sherpa means coming from the east, implying east of Tibet. So technically, they're Tibetan origin that migrated over 15th and 16th century to this side of the mountain. So Everest, which is a British dude's name. The local
you mentioned the Tibetan name for it. Can you say that again?
Chomolungma.
And that means?
So mother goddess of the universe. It's a very feminine entity. And
that's a much better name.
Yeah. And the goddess is called Miolang Sangma. And she's the goddess of inexhaustible giving. Only if you respect her and go abide by her tradition. And there's, I forget how many centuries ago this text was acquired, but it's a text or the prayer that bows, like humbles everything in her feet. So we do this puja or a ritual, prayer ritual in base camp before approaching the mountain, asking for her forgiveness first, confessing that we're about to step on you for a long period of time. So we even bring in our crampons and ice axe, all kinds of objects that we're going to take up, ask for forgiveness beforehand for hurting her, promising that we're never going to leave trash or not hurt her in any way. And there's a series of things, and the chanting goes on for hours and hours, and you just keep repeating. And then the local Lama looks for signs, positive signs from her. There are many ways to decipher it, whether it's a raven sitting on the flagpole or something, things like that. And only after those approvals come, we have a celebration, and that's basically
and the green light to go. Wow, that's very cool.
And we did.
And that's passed down
centuries.
Through the Sherpa lineage. Yeah.
No Sherpa will approach any mountain without a puja, even if the client doesn't want to do it. So in K2, which is in Pakistan, in a very predominantly Muslim society, there is no culture of doing this kind of puja, but we still did it. I did it. I took in, like I said, I had two of my main teachers like supporting the whole climb of K2. And so K2, again, thanks to the British, the dudes came in and was like, rename K1, K2, K3, K4, G1, G2,
so creative.
Very creative.
What's the original name of K2?
It's called Choguri, king of all mountains. So it's a masculine entity. And God, is he a masculine entity? He's freaking like just brutal. I the whole time I thought like there was a god sitting on the summit and saying, "Oh, you want to come to the top? Let me just throw you a rock and see if you can prove me." Anyway, so we did a puja asking for forgiveness from Choguri, and that puja was attended by people from all faiths, including local Muslim people, which are the Balti people in Pakistan. All that to say is like, I'm very grateful that my introduction to climbing was that before I came out into the world and went into, every other continent where I climbed with Westerners and other people. But it's very hard for me to approach a mountain without the rituals. Like it's just, we call it the approach, how you approach a mountain. Because, also we function in a very, if I may say, white cis dude. Predominantly it's all male, and the energy is very different.
Yeah. And meanwhile, none of the Sherpas are appropriately credited with just how extraordinary they are. Like we're in Hollywood. They're sort of the Sherpas are sort of the stuntmen of the climbing world, right? Like they do all these incredible things and they're just sort of overlooked because they're in service to somebody else who gets all the credit. But these guys are going up and down these mountains like all the time.
Not just that, they're carrying the load.
They're overlooked.
Of course. I mean, the whole history of mountaineering is like colonizers. It was a very colonial approach. We are going to conquer the British and the Italy fighting, different countries fighting to get to the top of mountains. Who's going to take credit? The first successful ascent that happened, it's called the British expedition, even though the person who climbed, two people, Tenzing Norgay, Nepali, he had 4 times gone up to that level. And that's why he was so important in the British expedition. Before Hillary. Yeah. And Hillary was, Sir Edmund Hillary, he was one of the most kindest human beings. I've never had the luck to meet him, but I just actually returned from a trip recently with Peter Hillary, his son. We were guiding in Antarctica. They're one of the most humblest families I know in the mountaineering tradition. They've done so much good for the region. Aside from him, like and he's always given credit to Tenzing Norgay. But Tenzing Norgay, till his death, didn't get credited. His 3 generations have passed by. Pretty much 70 years after his ascent, there's finally a movie being made about a person who's died. And so that just shows how far behind we are in terms of giving these people credit. But the other thing I wanted to say is like, yes, we don't give them credit, but as an audience, every spring season, when we hear of, if I may use the term Tom, Dick, and Harry climbing up the mountain, fucking ask, who the fuck took you up there? What are their names? Don't just say 50 Sherpas went up. It's like cattles, Tenzing Sherpa went up. Sonam Sherpa went up. Give them credit. It doesn't take away from it. My friend, between 2 brothers, they have, I think, 56 total summits of Everest alone, just one mountain. Kamirita Sherpa, the younger one, he just broke his own record of climbing the mountain 30 times.
Wow.
No human in the world has done that. Imagine a white man doing that. He would
it'd be
plastered.
Such a big deal. And this guy does it. It's like, oh, well, that's what
no,
they
nobody
do.
even knows about him.
Nobody knows the person's name or anything.
But this is
wild.
But this is, whose fault is it? Who doesn't give the credit? I mean, I myself within National Geographic has been fighting for this for almost 10 plus years now. It only started changing from 2018 when we did our first, I don't know if you've seen National Geographic magazine, the one, sorry for our racist coverage. We did one cover, but that took a lot of work. And then BLM happened and all this talk started happening. It's the Westerners who hasn't been crediting the Sherpa people, majority.
Yeah.
I'm not saying all of them. But and as an audience, now that the world is so open, we can always ask, who's the one who's led you up there? Who was carrying your oxygen? Who was your base camp manager? The freaking base camp, which is almost 1 hour to 1.5 hours of walking. Like it's almost like a little village. That itself is on a moving chunk of glacier. And I have footages that happen of, what happens before clients go in. It's built on the back of Sherpa people. It's really hard work to make a freaking base camp out of a moving glacier. So that itself is made by Sherpa people. So when Westerners come in and say, oh, I did this climb unsupported. Hell no, there's no fucking way you could, even if you spend half a day in base camp, which is not usual, it's way longer, you've taken support. So, yeah. Sorry, this aggravates me a lot.
And listen, like a lot of work remains, to tell those stories. And they're incredible stories. I am a total gearhead, and I've learned that people often overlook apparel. But what you wear isn't just clothes. It is, without a doubt, technology that can make or break a performance. And I can tell you that On is innovating in this space like no other, with next-gen premium fabrics and just this heightened level of sophistication and intentionality previously unheard of that puts them just miles beyond the competition. I've been rocking On's high-performance running apparel, all super lightweight, tailor-fit, built to move, and just gorgeous to get you out and get it done in fleet-foot comfort, no matter the weather. I'm super proud to be a brand partner with this impressive team. Truly Swiss innovation at its finest. To get you moving, On is offering an exclusive 10% discount. To redeem, head over to on.com/richroll and use code RICHROLL10 at checkout. Of all the mountains that you've climbed, 7 summits, I mean, I have to think that K2 was the most challenging and difficult.
Well, all the mountains in life that I've climbed. The 7 summits happened when it was also a different time in my life.
Yeah, that was 2012 to 2015.
Yeah. Well, I finished. So the first 5 of the 7, including Everest, I did back-to-back in 1.5 years. Just like I was going like crazy. Till I ended up with a frostbite in Denali. And this finger, which was cut up to here. It literally grew back. You can go to Siddhar Sinai and see my nails, how this case study, they call it a miracle case study. Anyway, we can talk about that
Your
later.
Your finger grew back?
Yes.
I have like a lizard? Really? I mean, it was cut off?
This part was cut off. This all grew back.
Including like the nails. The part with the nail and all of that?
So
and
nail
that came
was
back?
chopped off. I have pictures of, in case you don't believe me. So this is again...
You regrew your finger.
No, this is blessed by His Holiness. I've worn this since I have had...
What is that, an emerald? An opal?
Emerald and opal.
Emerald.
Yeah.
Wow.
Turquoise and... what was the other one you just said? Emerald.
Opal?
Opal.
Yeah. It's beautiful. And that's on the finger that grew back.
Yeah.
So the finger grew back because it was super powered through the ring.
Well, I also had
and the energy of the Dalai Lama.
and 9 surgeries.
Yeah, okay, yeah. And Cedar Sinai, the best of Western medicine.
Yeah.
All cooperating to regrow a finger.
But like when you get a frostbite, let's say if you get it in January, there's every chance that you could be amputated in August. Like you don't know how it's going to develop. So the first choice Siddhar Sinai doctor gave me was like, we can chop it off right now so that, because it was already damaged up to here, but it's going to, and then he was giving me options of the different types of, what do you call them? Like bionic, different ways I could have a prosthetic finger. Mm-hmm. And I looked at him and I said, do you have like a Wolverine claw? Because I thought he was joking. And he looked at me and said, Wasfia, this is really serious. Like you can damage rest of your hand if you don't measure it properly. The other way is to live it out, go through the pain. It's going to be intense pain, but we can, because it was like microscopic level, they had to do it in slices. It's kind of like the opposite of burn injury. So they didn't want to chop off different parts, like, because some cells were damaged and some weren't. Anyway, so all that to say that when that frostbite thing happened, Karmapa, who, I don't know if you know of him, but he's another very prominent teacher in Tibetan Buddhism. But he's very he's not angry, but when he talks, it's very, it pierces through all your lives. Like, you're just like, ah. So he just looked at me and he said, you're doing it too fast. And as he was saying it, I realized, wow, you're right. Like I was just banging out the summits,
without
not really living through the journey. And so the frostbite happened. It basically stopped me for almost a year, because I couldn't. The recovery was 9 months, so I couldn't go back to cold zone with that finger. But during that time, I really, and by this time, my whole life had changed, because after Everest, everything had changed. And I was a national figure, which brought in more harm than good. Being a single woman and, doing what I'm doing in a country like Bangladesh isn't, fame isn't the best thing for us. I'm not
What do you mean specifically? I mean, you become this national, you go from, somebody nobody's ever heard of to literally becoming like your country's biggest national hero. Right?
Yeah, I mean,
is that true or no?
Well, yeah, I mean, I did Kilimanjaro, Aconcagua, and then Everest. So that was the timeline. Aconcagua, which is the highest mountain of South America, is also the highest mountain outside the Himalayas. That got a lot of coverage because I somehow timed it on the Victory Day of Bangladesh. So the whole campaign of climbing the 7 summits was done to celebrate 40 years of Bangladesh's women's progress. And Aconcagua was in December and Everest started in March. So when I started going for Everest, there was a lot of publicity about it because it was Everest. But I also knew that nobody believed in me. Like everyone wanted me to fail. And there was so much media pressure, but I really didn't want that. I wanted to just have my own spiritual time and climb the mountain. A lot of other shit shows happened. And then when I came down, and there's a specific point in Khumbu Icefall when the cell reception and I was checking news. So when you're coming down, you got to be as quick as possible because this is already monsoon season coming. So everything's starting to melt. So from, the crevices that have ladders, for example, those ladders fall in. So a lot of rerouting has to happen. So you want to make sure that you have enough energy, food, everything to come down very fast. So we came down, summited on 26th May, came down by 28th, me and Nima Sherpa, who was my brother. He's passed away, and my climbing teacher. And so we came down, and in that cell reception, the first 50 messages was like, your so-and-so is on the front page claiming to be your mother. Your so-and-so, like, no. And I remember looking at the new, like, can you imagine coming down 29,029 feet, hypoxic, you're hungry, you just went through like avalanches and this whole 3 months long expedition, and the first news is like your two sides of your family is fighting. And at that point I look back, you can't really see the summit, but kind of towards the summit I look back and I was like, should I just go back, because I don't want to deal with this right now. And from that time, when I came back to Bangladesh, I mean, in the VIP section, there was my father's side was one side, there were there were two buses full of people that came from my village. So even though we live in the city, we all come from particular villages. And my dad's village is one of the most conservative part of Bangladesh. And these people have all like my pictures on their crown, buses and drums. And just like before because I got into a lot of trouble as an activist, and I was bringing shame for my village. A lot happened with the Chinese government. That's a whole nother story. But so my village people actually didn't recognize me at that time. They were ashamed because intelligence went into the villages looking for me, Bangladeshi intelligence. And now the same people traveled all the way from my village to the capital in buses with food, and they brought pajeros to take me, and like everyone was there. And in the pictures you see me smiling because then I had to be Wasfia out there, but internally that was probably one of the lowest moments in my life. Like externally I'm having to be Wasfia, Nazreen, but internally having my parents come back, everyone who came back to my life, yes, it was great, but I also knew the reason was wrong. I knew why they came back. And so that kind of, I didn't realize how big it was going to, like I didn't think it out. And also because I think it was, a lot of people doubted me, and it was kind of like a slap on their face. Like, I told you I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it, and I did it. Because people in Bangladesh speak a lot. Not everyone is a doer. We generally
they talk a lot of shit.
Yeah. And then,
do you find that is that motivating for you? No. When you hear that, you sort of think, well, I'll show them, or
no? I think my personality. I'm a doer. I come from the karma family, or I'm ruled by Mars. I don't know if you're familiar with the Vedic astrology, but
my wife is very familiar. But you'll have to fill in my gaps.
Yeah. If you give me your birth time, I can figure it out for you. But it was very important for me to understand what planet I'm ruled by, which is basically it's called the ascendant lord, or your Lagna Lord. So I am ruled by Mars. It's the energy of pioneers, athletes, doers. Everything should have happened 2 days ago. That kind of energy. But the fully embodied positive part of being ruled by Mars is the commander-in-chief, who doesn't fight himself, themselves. They sit back, send off warriors to fight, which I didn't know before. I was functioning from a wounded warrior stage. And my progression has been to learn how to be a skillful warrior, which I don't think I've been there yet, but I'm learning and I'm getting there. So I don't fight anymore. I don't do my activism anymore like how I would have in my 30s or 20s. And I think 40 was a major turning point also of realization, thanks to Los Angeles.
In other words, this wounded warrior incarnation of the Mars energy, in your case, would be one that was fueled in part by this pain body over the abandonment, right? Like this anger, this latent anger that gets translated into action. So that being sort of an impetus to these challenges that have like served you well and, given you this platform and all the good kind of things that have come from that, but recognizing that there's still healing to be done so that you can ascend into a more of a commander-in-chief energy. Like, that's a cool way of thinking about it.
Mm.
What do people misunderstand about Everest? We all see the photos of the train of people going up to the top now, and how it's littered with what people leave
Shit.
behind there. Yeah,
Literal shit.
I know that you like had to kind of walk past dead people, right? That you had spent time with in base camp.
Yeah.
But it's easy to make presumptions or conjure an idea of what that experience is because so many people have done it and they talk about it, and we see these videos and these photographs. But where are our kind of assumptions about that wrong?
I would say you don't need $180,000 to climb Everest, first of all. Do not pay these Western companies to take you for that much money, or even locals. They're local people. And end of the day, it's the local people who's doing the work. So you might as well better off going with a local company with Sherpas, giving them credit and paying way less. So when I did Everest, for example, I did it all like in a very small team. I knew I was going to climb with Nima. I hired everything separately because I already knew the cost structure of what happens. The permit is $13,000. That's the main chunk of money. Every single person going past base camp, whether you make it to camp 1 or 2, has to pay $13,000. That goes straight to the pockets of politicians or locals, but it doesn't go to the locals of the region. It goes to Kathmandu. So Sherpa people are still not benefiting from that. Most foreign companies, I would let's say even if they charge you $180,000 or $20,000 or whatever number, the maximum that would go to a Sherpa person, which is pretty much their whole year's earning, $6,000 maximum. And each of these Sherpa, mostly males, have a number of children to feed, and they're the main bread earners. So I would just say structure it in a way. I think everyone needs to. Yes, there is the commercialization of it, but Sherpa people do need that money. That's their living. So I don't think we can change. We can, at one point everyone's like, just barricade Everest, don't let any more people in. No, this is always going to be attracting people. We cannot stop that. This is the highest summit of the world. But we can bring in regulation, right? But the stuff that you see out here in the news, I will say that does happen, but that's only a very small time on the mountain. I can show you 2 hours of presentation of how remote and silent of this mountain is in different parts of the year. So before when I used to guide for Everest Base Camp, I've now moved everything to fall season. Like I only take clients towards the end of the year. There's not a one person on the trail. And it's so nice and pleasant. Weather is much better.
Then how come that's not the
That's never portrayed
time?
in the media. Because the weather season up on the top part of the mountain, May is really the perfect time. Fall season can be cold up there. So very few, if anyone is climbing the mountain at that time, it would be like the rough Europeans trying to do cool stuff, like in a 2-person team.
So it's only in a very specific time window in May when you see, that like
April, May,
the traffic jam going up.
So if you notice, everyone's summit days, it's usually all like Edmund Hillary, Tenzing Norgay summit in May 29th. I summited May 26th. It's all towards that last week that people start summiting, 1920. And, with the way things are planetary-wise, climate crisis-wise, the weather window is like the year that I summited, there were only 3 nights you could go to the summit. Whereas even like less than 10 years ago, it was much wider window to go reach the summit. And, like the monsoon weather that happens in lower region in Bangladesh, and this, in my talks, I show this without the borders, is like whatever is happening in Bay of Bengal, that kind of predicts how the wind is going to form above Everest during the summit season.
Right.
It's all connected.
Yeah. The interconnectedness of everything, which is, very Tibetan Zen Buddhist, right?
Yeah. And the other thing that really fascinated me is like when you have the orbital perspective of
like being on the summit,
or just from space, just looking at the Himalayas, K2, which is a masculine entity, and Everest, which is a feminine energy, they're kind of like the head and tail of this kind of backbone that's going all the way from Nepal to, it's just so beautiful.
K2 isn't as high as Everest, but technically much more difficult.
It's
and
only
in your case,
less than 200 meters.
There's quite a story around your ascent of K2.
Yeah, so we are currently making a feature doc about it, which would give the more inner journey of K2. But geopolitically speaking, K2 is it's one of the most dangerous zones of the world. Dangerous. I mean, if you're climbing K2, nothing else can be dangerous. And I remember, so it took me, I was the first Bangladeshi to get a permit to climb the mountain 50 years after Bangladesh was formed. To get the permit, so you need two, one is a trekking permit and a climbing permit. And I needed to acquire two for K2 and also Broad Peak. So I climbed Broad Peak before climbing K2, which is another 8,000 meter peak. People underestimate it, but it's such a long mountain. It's like it can, so many people have died in Broad Peak. I saw with my own eyes one guy just falling off, like when he sat down just to rest, and he couldn't hold, and he just fell on the Chinese side.
Fell to his death.
Yeah,
right in front of you.
Yeah, I mean, on K2, the shit I've seen, I'm still waking up from it 2 years after, literally 2 years after. So that's also another story. Like I have PTSD and stuff that I have been dealing with. But K2, I've seen so many dead bodies in my entire career. I actually have an album in my phone called I See Dead People. And so, sorry, it's
of
funny,
all that. Oh my God.
So
that's so heavy.
The type of dead bodies I've seen on K2 is crazy. It's like all broken because, the body freezes overnight. It becomes super heavy, super hard. So it's very hard to, first of all, move it. You need more than 8 to 12 people to carry a body. But when the winds come and it's like tossing the body, the first thing that happens, it breaks the neck. So there's a lot of headless bodies on these mountains. Majority of them are headless because this is the most, thinnest part of...
and they're just up there because there aren't 8 to 12 people to retrieve the bodies. And so they just persist up there.
Usually on Everest, you need... So Nepal climbing scene is much more logistically advanced, whereas compared to Pakistan is almost like 50 years behind. There's no logistical infrastructure to do anything out there. But in Nepal, usually your family has to come with the request. No one's going to move anyone's dead body unless you ask for it. So, for example, before I went, I left a will saying, if I die in death zone is 26,000 feet up, where human bodies basically stop reproducing any cells. You lose brain cells at a rate faster than it can be replaced. So your body's basically eating yourself out. So you spend as less time possible in death zone. So that 26,000 to 29,000 feet is the hardest push, given also that you've already been on the mountain for almost so many weeks already, so your body's all dying. So I left a will saying, if my death happens in dead zone, do not worry about bringing me back because I'm already probably left with the best view. B, I don't want to, endanger my Sherpa brothers bringing my body from up there because it's one of the most riskiest job to bring. Can you imagine holding a frozen body through a steep hill all the way from, why would I let anyone go through that? And the cost of it is super expensive. But then I also knew that if I died below death zone, my brothers would come and get me. So, Nepal's been my spiritual home from so long ago. So I had that in the back of my head. But to answer your question, the bodies aren't being brought back because the families probably preferred them to be there.
How many dead bodies are up there then?
Over 250 dead bodies. So up there, you're hypoxic. So this is also part of the trainings, like meditation and, the mind training part of it, because I knew what I was going to face up there. But in that low oxygen level, your mind is so fucked. It's like you don't have energy or the capability to make rational decision. So when you see a dead body, even from the side of your eye, automatically your mind starts this negative conversation. Am I going to be next?
Of course.
I could be next, or it's just spiraling down. And so to really bring myself out of the spiral and like saying, okay, do not focus over there. Sometimes it's just a hand. Like sometimes you'd be like, oh, is there trash? And I have pictures of this. Like, no, it's a dead body of the back without the head. Like it's kind of like being on a shroom trip where you're seeing stuff and you really don't know what the hell that is. And you look closely and it's like, oh shit, it is what I think it is.
In terms of making sure your mindset is dialed in for those, kind of super acute situations, how important is or has been your meditation practice? Like, what is the relationship between meditation, how you bring meditation into your daily life, and how does that inform like your ability to, kind of navigate such heightened experiences?
I always say meditation or mind training stuff is 90% of the game, because I've seen world-class athletes. I've seen Olympians go up there and
K2.
Even Everest. Camp 3, this woman, I won't mention her name, super famous athlete. This avalanche happening in a different mountain, and she freaks out saying, oh, I left my daughter at home. I'm like, oh, all this time you didn't know your daughter was at home. No, it's just Everest gives you, and mountains like Everest gives you an excuse to give up every single moment. So for your mind not to, because nothing is going to go according to plan up there. You can prepare as much as you can. And, if there's a saying that as a mountaineer, you have a backup plan of a backup plan of a backup plan, but also go in knowing that none of it may not work. And you have to be adaptive next day if you wake up and see this. And a lot of people can't deal with that. So yes, of course, physical training is needed. Of course, the high altitude training is needed. All those is required. But if you don't have the mindset to deal with it, you're not going to make it out. You're not going to last out there. And forget about K2. Like just getting to base camp of K2, 90 kilometers. Like most people get sick just going in. And this is not with the tea house lodge situation like Nepal. This is all remotest part of the Karakoram.
And if you have to define what that mindset is, the mindset that is going to allow you to succeed in that environment, what is that?
Number one, positive, just that, and that there's a solution to everything, no matter how things are turning out. And that, there are some days when people wake up and then things that it's doomsday, nothing, like people give up. But really, patience is the biggest thing that you need up there. And wise decision-making skills.
But you can't make those wise decisions unless you're in a calm neutral state, right? So much of it is about adaptability and, being able to have some equanimity or neutrality amidst, chaotic, shape-shifting circumstances.
The other thing that really, it's not formal meditation, but really helped me was having a connection to Goddess Chamulungma. That started months before that through His Holiness Dalai Lama, and he told me who she was. And really, whether you're in a dream state, physical, like waking state, like having that connection with her. And she will welcome you if you reach out. And you'll hear many Sherpas say this over and over. They've had so many dreams about her. The Kamirita Sherpa, who I was just talking about, who is the highest record holder, 30 climbs, he quit his 26th or 27th push because he woke up with a dream in Camp 4, I believe, where the goddess was telling her, no, you're overdoing it. And he backed off. Like, that's how respectful Sherpa people are. And I also think it's important to state here, like in Western media, especially in Western media, in all media, but especially out here, people just say, oh, these Sherpas, like Sherpa has become, and I have been called a Sherpa in my life. Oh, will you be my Sherpa?
Right. It's a monolith.
But it's a derogatory term because not all Sherpas are climbers. Not all Sherpas are porters. Sherpas are also doctors. Sherpas are also engineers. So for the current generation, so I know it's said in a good way, positive way, when like someone told me, oh, you want to be my Sherpa? Like, oh, you're someone who's going to guide me or help me. That's how it's said. But from their perspective, or if you were a Sherpa person, like a lot of my Sherpa friends, they don't want their children to be ever going back to the mountains. They don't want to do that work, and they don't want to be identified with that work anymore, because they started as porters, right, for the British. And then the kid that did all the work. It's hard work that never been recognized for. So Sherpa is the ethnicity name, but it's also the culture name. So it gets all muddled up. There are many other ethnicities that are working in the mountains. They're Muggars, they're Gurungs, they're Rais. The media just portrays everyone as Sherpa people. And it's important because in Nepal, there's so many different ethnicities. And unfortunately, there's a class system. There's kind of like a hierarchy. And so Sherpa people don't, like, from their angle, they're very proud people. And so calling a Rai a Sherpa or a different ethnicity a Sherpa, it's kind of insulting.
That's interesting. I didn't know anything about that. I mean, I suspect the use of the word, there's no intent to, be using it in a negative way. It's just a lack of education around that.
Yeah, but I won't mention people from a certain country, but there's specific group of people that also use that term, not from Western world. In Asia, there's one country that treats Sherpa people as if they're slaves. Like the term Sherpa means, oh, you're supposed to be helping me. But so yeah, I have a great article on it I can send you later. But just really, because there's the new generation of Sherpa people, they're all in New York. They want to be Uber drivers rather than being in the mountain. They don't look at that job as so what I'm trying to say is there are many Sherpas that are just engineers or doctors or in so many different professions that are, I guess, from an angle looked more respectfully at.
Yeah, understood. With respect to your K2 attempt, the thing we haven't talked about is the fact that you had a really severe case of COVID prior to that, not that long before you made the attempt, right?
Yeah. So originally I meant to go in 2021 because I wanted to time it with 50 years of Bangladesh's independence. In 2020 end of February, March-ish, I was coming back from Hawaii after doing 19 back-to-back talks, 17 or 19, and I was very tired. My immune system was down. And I hopped into a flight back to LA, and as I entered the plane, I instinctively knew that half of that plane was coming from Asia, and they were all affected. And then that was the night that...
Was this in March of 2020? When was this?
March of 2020.
So this was
before America officially closed everything.
Wow.
And then... hospitals didn't know what to do. They didn't know anything about COVID. But there was this one night when I believe it was Trump who called all Americans in Europe back to come back to the country. And that group had just come in. And in LAX, I was stuck in this group of people just back from Europe with the Italian virus. I forget which version of it was, the first one, the lethal one that was killing everyone in Italy. So everyone was coughing, and I think I was exposed to it for a long time. And so I got COVID. I went flatline.
Yeah, your heart stopped, actually. It was that bad.
But I entered, doctors or my friends, everyone out here was freaking out. But that was one of the most profoundly enlightening time for me when I went out. I was, a practice called... are you familiar with Tibetan Book of the Dead? Mm-hmm. So we study... I have a long way to go still, but we prepare for death it's part of our practice. And if you study the Tibetan Book of Dead, and a lot of the things that are there, it didn't actually work out for me of what I thought it was going to be a tunnel vision, the typical description
The light.
of the. But it was for me, and a detailed version of it will be in my book. But it was a profound kind of like a floating light, and I could feel it was me, but there was no physical version of me. And my teachers, all 4 of my main teachers were there, and I could hear their voice, but I couldn't see them, but I could feel them, and it was just vast as the ocean. And Holiness was speaking, Dalai Lama was speaking, Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, who's my root teacher, he was there. And this one line from another teacher, Karmapa, he said, you have work to do still. And because I had suffered so much physically, I think that light really was healing. So I didn't want to come back. But Karmapa, I think was it Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche said something from the side, no, Wasfia. In a very gentle way, he was trying to bring me back. But then Karmapa was very like sharp and just says things that just jabs you in the heart. And he said that, and that's when I woke up.
You snapped back into the body. So you literally flatlined.
Yes. And then,
how long were you flatlined?
It's not finished. Then I got diagnosed with pneumonia, and my heart wasn't like it was. They didn't even tell me that I had pneumonia, because my Chinese doctor, who I had prescribed, she's a herbalist. She was coming to see me, and she said, if we told you that your heart was really struggling, like with everyone dying in the hospital, like people were dying at this time, they didn't know what the hell to do. Said, I don't think you had so much. And I think I had a lot of anxiety at that time. I was all alone, like all my relatives, everyone was at home. And
lockdowns were happening at this point.
And then they won't keep me in the hospital.
Venice, so far away from home. Yeah.
And also people treated me like I could kill them, because they didn't know what the hell was going on. They didn't know at that time that if you come, you like even getting grocery or anything.
Right. This is when we were spraying our produce and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Early days.
Yeah. So long story short, it was a huge recovery, 18 months recovery. But my left side.
Hold on a second. You're jumping ahead. So you flatlined. Do you know how long you flatlined for?
No, but it should be there. Several seconds, I think. But for
not
me,
long enough. Like
but for me, it was a long time.
Your experience of it was different from like
the
actual amount of time. Yeah. But it wasn't like they pronounced you dead or anything that. But like, did they? Did they have to like put the?
No,
what do they call those things?
The doctor had
paddles?
that ready. What do you call them?
The paddles?
Paddles. They had it ready. They were about to zap. And I was so disappointed seeing, like I was just hanging out with my teachers I hadn't seen for a long time. And then I'm out into this reality. I was disappointed to be alive again, to be very frank.
And so what do you make of that experience?
I don't know yet. But that experience didn't stop there. It prolonged into an 18 months long recovery where my entire left side was...
You had Bell's palsy.
Yes.
Yeah.
But also my kidney was stopped, not functioning well. My spleen had gone, like entire left side was dysfunctional. I couldn't walk to the kitchen by myself. Everything was really hard. And that was my physical injury. But that period of 18 months was probably the most inner work. So the left side is related to mommy wounding, or not necessarily wounding, but mommy side.
So it's all
right
coming
side
up.
Dad.
It's all
everything.
It's
came
all
up.
spilling out. Yeah.
So
you thought you had healed.
I thought I was healed.
So this is like a reckoning.
But also at that time I was still in contact with her, and so it was aggravating me a lot every time she checked in. And so that is the time when I cut her off from my life, 2020, when I was healing. And I was so this is a time when a lot of, from 2020 onwards to now, I've somehow gotten connected to a lot of shamans and healers around LA. And now I know why my teachers send me. And because I really struggled in LA, and I was always like, every time I would talk to my teacher, I was like, is my karma over now? Can I go back? Like, can I leave? And
haven't I done enough? Like, we're done with this, right? So from that perspective, there is there is this idea or this perspective that, COVID is this gift, this very challenging gift that's been delivered to you, and this very long recovery as a way of slowing you down, like to your point earlier about, being impressed with the idea of patience, right? Patience is something you resist. So you contract this virus, you have a very difficult time for a long time, but this is forcing you to stop, right? So that you can actually confront this thing and finally heal it.
Yeah, so I think healing has to be like, it's not like we reach a summit and just remain there. It has to be step by step. And up to that point, whatever healing work I had done, especially concerning my mom, was from the time that she had left me to then. Whereas I never addressed the little girl that was there when she existed and was still in our lives. So, and that moment or the period made me realize how since 29 to now or then, I was overcompensating, not just for my parents, in every work that I did, because I was still functioning from a wounded state.
So the hyper performance, like all of that is like a product of this unhealed wound.
Yeah, the short version of how I went to the top of all mountains is unresolved childhood trauma.
It's true though, right?
Which is majority of people on top of their game. But so that period made me, and I was finally ready to just heal. Like I'm just done, And so I really used that time to deep dive into every work that I could have done. And like my root teacher said that, you've cleared almost 20 years of karma in that 1 year, 2020. And had I not, before I moved, so I moved to LA permanently right before pandemic, end of 2019, not knowing that the pandemic was going to hit. Before moving here, I was almost, for years, I was just tuck, every continent, like I was performing, achieving.
Running away the whole time, kind of.
Not necessarily running away. I think the environment in Bangladesh, being the figure I was, I couldn't really do the work. You cannot do the work where you can't heal in the place that you got sick. So I think it was all meant to happen. I was sent here so I could heal properly. I could create the community or find the community of healers and practitioners who would help me, So it's been, and I'm still healing. Like, I don't think like I said, we don't reach a summit and just exist there.
What are some of the modalities that have been most helpful?
Well, somatic therapy. I went to therapy since I was a, late teenager, and talk therapy does help. But I had a lot of stored trauma in my body. From 2020, with this physical illness and all the work that I did, my body is so light now. Like, I can't tell you, Rich, like in 2020, up to 2021, I was carrying so much baggage in my body. Everything cleared up. Like, I look younger now than I looked in my late 20s because I just let that out. And, there are many ways I've done it. And it's a bit esoteric, very esoteric. So I went to all kinds of practitioners. But the other cool part of it is because I couldn't go back to Nepal at that time, no traveling was happening. But when I ended up going to Nepal in 2022, I hadn't even discussed anything with my Tibetan teacher, Dilgo Khyentse Yangtze Rinpoche. But when he saw me, he told me the version he saw, and it was literally like he watched me throughout the whole thing. He knew everything that I was going through, and he was doing his prayers for me. It's just crazy. From the time that I entered the death state and came back.
Like this was all just divinely orchestrated, and he knew how it was going to unfold the whole time.
No, they were worried as hell. Like there was no guarantee of... And even the medical system here, it took me, I had to figure all of it out. Bangladesh has better medical system than America, I have to tell you. If I was in Bangladesh, I would get VVIP treatment, and just the way insurance and shit works here, it's crazy. Anyway, that's a whole nother topic. But what was I gonna say? So then 2022 summer is when I ended up climbing the hardest mountain on the planet.
I mean, during that 18 months when you're trying to physically heal, you have kidney issues, a variety of issues.
Also,
you have
nerve damage.
Bell's palsy, all of these things that you're trying to heal. Was there lung damage also?
Oh, yeah. Lung was the main. My left lung was main. And I didn't feel it till Camp 2 in K2. It hurt like hell. But they're still great.
Yeah, I mean, you have to have unbelievable lungs to do something like that, and to go in impaired, still trying to, that's like wild, man.
The stitches that you trying to breathe. But what happened was in K2, there were boulder size, like humongous rocks that were falling and just knocking people out, like while you're hanging. And mind you, I'm also filming at this time with another guy, like Mingma Sherpa and myself. We film our entire, like 2-people camera team. Mm-hmm. If climbing K2 wasn't hard enough, like filming the entire journey was a much harder task. But I had this rock fall coming, and that's when I had an episode of major panic attack and just PTSD rush after a long time. And I thought I had dealt with it. And first when you experience that, it's like guilt and just anger. Or for me, it was like, why the fuck is this coming up again? And in high altitude, it's very hard to, your mind, the air energy within you, it's very hard to control that. So I had to actually go back down to base camp and just like sit with myself and have a talk and just come back again. I feel like now, and then the last episode was in this March in Antarctica. Another incident happened that resurfaced some things, like just I didn't know till coming to LA and going to somatic therapy that I was living with survivor's guilt for a long time. Even though, because I've not killed them personally, but I survived.
Just the people that you survived on these
No, my
summits?
best friend died. I've lost really like close people on the mountains, and I somehow survived. And in 2015, in the earthquake that gave, the biggest avalanche, that took my best friend Dan, my biggest climbing partner, brother of life, and just visuals from the bodies and everything. Nima, who was my climbing partner, died in a motorbike accident. Like all these deaths happened and people just left. And coming from that place of losing so many people already in my life. But what I was going to say, in Antarctica, I felt like, because it's in Antarctica. Have you been to Antarctica?
No.
Everything is slow. Like time stops. There is no concept of time or space. So things are already happening slow-mo in your mind, or at least for me it was. But I think this time, because of the work I have done in the last 3 years specifically, I was able to bounce back way faster. Half of my mind could, I get paranoia and anxiety kind of feeling in half of my mind, and half of my mind is like, no, you've done this before. Like there was this courageous aspect where like, no, just breathe in, do this, do that. So I was able to process the whole thing. I was actually talking to Conrad about it because we have similar, incidents about losing people and stuff. And it's just, we're never going to be at a place where it never comes back.
Right.
It's just how we manage it and how we deal with it on a daily basis.
Your commitment to this healing journey, though, is really inspiring to me. It is. It is. And as I said earlier, I'm kind of processing this experience that I had in Dharamsala, and I'm very confronted by this idea of the mother's love for the child, because I have a very tricky and challenging relationship with my own mother, which is trifling in comparison to like what you've had to contend with, but it's been an impediment to me kind of embracing what the Dalai Lama had to share. Like it's a block, right? And that block obviously is exactly what I need to be seeing, because that's where the work sits, right?
I was just going to say
You know
that.
what I mean?
That's
Yeah,
probably
like,
why he said it in
right.
the first place.
And this is a thing. This has been a thing, like, you know, for many, many years. Like, I know that I have to heal this thing, right? But I've lacked like the proper way to approach it. Like, I don't really, like, there are many times where I thought that I had kind of transcended this issue. Clearly I have not. It's that same thing when you think that you've kind of managed it and then it comes up again. And this is like my mountain to climb, right? And I'm trying to figure out how to do it. And then here you arrive, who you know, has had this exact same experience, except super heightened in comparison to mine. And I'm like, oh my God, this woman is going to give me all the answers that I need to figure this out for myself. It's like unbelievable.
Well,
it like, I can't help but think like, this is part of some kind of design that exists outside of myself. Like there's a divinity and a mysticism to it that's quite extraordinary. And when I think about all the things that you've done, you didn't sit down and say, here are my life goals and I'm going to write it out and here's how it's going to happen. Like, no, this has been this unbelievable, fantastic, mystical journey that you've been on that is deeply spiritual. And patient zero is like the Dalai Lama who says, go to the mountains, and like you go and then look at all these things that have happened. It's really quite extraordinary.
Thank you. As you were talking, I wonder if there's a lot of it stored in your body, which I know it is.
So much of it is.
But when those blocks, what helped me in my journey is removing those blocks, because when those blocks are still in our body, our nervous system cannot function properly, 100%. So there's no point forcing yourself to release it before you. Somatic therapy changed my entire life. Thank you, LA. Because I didn't even know. Are you familiar with that term?
No, but you're going to tell me who I'm going to go to.
Okay.
And then I'm going to go. And you're going to be, I'm not going to say you're going to be my Sherpa. I now know better than to use that word, right? But maybe you can be my guru or my teacher here.
No.
Can I enlist you?
Healing sister in your healing journey.
Yeah.
We're all healing in some way.
I'll go with that. But you're gonna help me out, right?
But I can assure you that what he said to you was meant for you.
Yes, I know, right? And I'm like sitting with it, and I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this? You know, I know I'm supposed to do something. No, I think, you know, I think when, and I was talking to my wife about this, like right after the experience, like when he's like, well, you know, in order to like experience love and give love, you have to just, you know, embody the mother's love for the child. And when I think about, when I reflect on, you know, my own mother, I don't experience compassion. I experience resentment and misplaced anger and all of these complicated like emotions that obviously are impediments to the solution, which is love, right? And so how do I break down those impediments? How do I deconstruct that wall and find a way forward? Like this is like the biggest thing that I'm trying to do right now. And then suddenly you appear.
That's really interesting because it's very similar. Like when I was telling you that he was telling me to do this, and in my mind I was like,
yeah, I was just like, fuck that.
But over time, the more I sat with the 1 minute practice of imagining myself in her womb and what she was going through and the trauma she came from, the generational trauma she till today carries, reflecting on that, being her, not as Wasfia, not as rich. Take your mom, embody your mom at where she was. Mm-hmm. Do you know much about your past history, like your grandfathers? And
a little bit, but I could learn more.
Yeah. So that really helped me generate compassion towards her and ultimately really forgive her. Like I really, from the bottom of my heart, want her to leave very peacefully. Like I don't want any kind of suffering. And I know I mean that. But I never felt like that even 10 years ago.
And how do you feel? You said you feel lighter. Like what is the feeling that you have? Like
I always
knowing that,
lived
like really
with pain.
owning that.
There was a lot of chronic pain and I would get injuries all the time. And I think I've cut that pattern. I released all this stored trauma. And like, I think it was TR who said, how the fuck did you, TR is our...
He's the guy. Yeah.
My trainer. He's like, how the fuck did you climb all this mountain with all this trauma in your body? Your leg is separated from... Like this thing he only fixed after K2, which is post 2022. This is last year mainly. But so yeah, just energetically, just so much lighter. Like it almost feels like I've lost 50 kilos, like from my, like this backpack I was carrying is just out. And more free, just mind was very free. Just I'm under no captivity.
Yeah.
And maybe you can draw yourself a map on what that freedom might feel like and have a goal like, oh, I'm doing this because this is what's going to give me your ultimate freedom.
Yeah. I like that.
I will also say that doing that work towards my mom, like when I, not just mom, parents, anyone who's hurt you, like when I started, step by step doing that work, it changed my entire pattern of people that I used to attract to. Because when we still have that mother wounding and operating from that mother wounding or father wounding, so I'll just give an example. I had a lot of narcissist people around me with the wrong agenda, starting from my previous trainer to like only friends because they could gain something from me, because that's what my mom was. So I was attracting all these people because somehow I was probably also codependently, trying to recreate friendships. Like they were all versions of my mom.
Right. You're seeking validation and acceptance in people you perhaps look up to, right? To salve that wound. But I would also imagine, I wouldn't be surprised if also those abandonment issues show up in any kind of attempt at a romantic relationship where you're going to push people away before they can push you away. Well, anytime it feels like perhaps the relationship is teetering, you're going to be the one to break up to protect yourself.
Fight or flight mode.
Yeah. Right. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, I dated my mother for, I think, 15 years. All in all 7 continents, literally. A version of my mom.
Yeah.
Till I started doing work. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, not, like I said, like my work people, trainers, people around me, so many of them were versions. And then the people who would actually be the right mutually benefiting relationship, those people started pouring in from.
Right.
Yeah, and it's...
Yeah, because you have to heal yourself. You have to be the person that those types of people would be attracted to before those people come into your life. And
then also, every now and then, the universe is going to send you a version of her again to see... To
test you?
Yeah. And
how's that going?
I was like, oh yeah, now I know my boundaries now. No, I laugh at now when I see a version. It was like 2 years, even 2 years ago, I'd fall for this shit. But now I know better.
I love how you frame your climbing in the context of humility. Like people like to say you conquered a mountain, and you're always quick to say like nobody conquers a mountain. Like it's a surrender. You surrender to the mountain. What are some of the lessons that we can learn from your experiences on being on such incredible peaks?
Yeah, from the very beginning, I found that word. And even now, media says Wasfia conquered this. My whole body's like, why do you still use it? Because the view before the summit is like everyone's begging the mother to go up for even a split second. Even it's like 1 second, please give us one moment on the summit. As soon as you come down, you're like, no, I freaking conquered. Like the ego steps in, and some of our mountaineers' egos are bigger than the mountains they climb themselves. So I feel like not just with mountains, but any part of nature, like even with the environment, climate crisis, especially in America, I hear often, save Mother Earth. Like, oh, please. Like Mother Earth can just toss you out in a fraction of a second. I've seen it over and over. I've seen earthquakes, avalanches, anything and everything that you knew could be gone in a fraction of a second if a tsunami comes. So we know we need to be healing ourselves. we need to be saving ourselves, and Mother Nature will heal herself by itself. So having this higher ego state over the mother, I feel is really wrong. And another practice is, I think, when the internal elements within us are balanced, and when we are calm, and this is a very Buddhist practice as well, the external elements settle on its own. When so many of us humans are functioning in anger, jealousy, all this negative, greed, whatever you want to call it, that creates a lot of these outer dimensions. And
the microcosm produces the macrocosm.
Exactly.
I've read that you said, mental health is planetary health. Like there is a nexus between like how we treat ourselves and the outer manifestations of our interior world is what's creating what we see around us that needs to get fixed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is also a very Buddhist thing, right? Like the way you save the world is you save yourself. Or if you want to fix the world, fix yourself.
If we all focused on mental health and our own health, I think half of the world's problems would be gone. Like we don't have to do anything. If we were in full control of our mind and our bodies.
It's empowering to hear that.
I truly believe that.
But mental health right now we're not doing well with that, are we? Collectively.
No.
At least in the West.
Well, in the East, it's a shame to talk about, like, what? Mental health? Like, I think in West is ahead a little bit. LA is for sure. But yeah, that's my focus too. I was just thinking coming up here, my podcast is going to be called Climbing Inner Mountains.
Yeah. Well, that's what we've been doing today.
Yeah. But it's like nothing impresses me like your world, like whether you've gone to space or whatever, if internally you haven't done the work.
What does your relationship with gratitude look like?
Oh, every moment, every day. It's not, honestly, like this past couple of months have been hard. Not even the last year, like to really go back to a state of gratitude. But I think, again, going back to karma, like there's positive karma, neutral karma, negative karma. And when we don't have gratitude, it often goes automatically to negative because we are not appreciating what like this, the fact that we can sit with food, 3 types of drinks, with such a nice environment talking to you. This means already that both of us and those people associated with us have done a lot of good work in the past, good merits for us to come sit in a time like this when so many people in the wars or in the rest of the world are suffering, that we can have this positive experience. Rejoice. You use that word specifically, and rejoice automatically when you look at other people's good things, good achievements, and rejoice on it, especially on things that you don't have. That's what multiplies your positive karma. And enough people don't reflect on that there's a way around multiplying your positive and putting the negative, like subduing the negative karma. I think we should do a course in that. But
I'm interested in the formal practice of cultivating it when you notice like you're not experiencing it. Like, is there something that you do or a
4 a.m.
or a habit?
Every morning to 6 a.m. I have a 2-hour period.
2 hours?
Yeah, before heading to the gym.
Walk me through that before you go to the gym. Wow.
Well, now he has made the time 5:45, so I have to be at goals at 5:45.
Be where? Oh, at the gym. Okay. So you get up at what time?
Usually I'm on the mat by 4 a.m.
Wow.
Yeah. I haven't been sleeping properly, I must say, but 4 a.m. and that's, that's practice has been going from Dharamsala days. So the first part's, it's not same every day, but usually it's the several texts that we study, and it's different every. Like right now, I'm finishing certain practices, so it's more the mantra chanting, so clearing your speech. So we have so many mantras that we do, but and I'm not the most highest expert to explain mantras, but I would say that it really refines your inner karmas, and it really helps me. And we all have different body types, so what speech practices are going to do for me might not do the same for you, if that makes sense. So then after that, I have sitting meditation, which is both analytical and just like we call it insight meditation, I guess here, which is vipassana. And then sometimes visuals, like so let's say, I'll just give a stupid example. If I'm working on a certain project, really planning it out visually and how morally, ethically, rightfully I would do, but also projected visually. And then, people who are not familiar with Tibetan practice might get confused with it, but like the deity practices we do, I'll just say like it's almost like having those deities are avatars. So these are the deity practices are more in which is called the tantric practices. And it's hard to explain over a podcast, but the specific deity that I'm practicing with is ultimately the avatar within me. It's the energy quality. So I'm trying to develop that within myself. And at the end of the practice, the deity merges into my heart chakra, which is where my mind lives, and we become one. And then, closing ceremony and then
Wow. And are you doing this with the counsel of a teacher
yes,
or a guru?
Yeah, everything has been passed on. So I have 4 main teachers. Both Dalai Lama and Karmapa are so busy now. So Karmapa is often considered as the second most important Lama after Dalai Lama. But I don't think you can hierarchically put it like that. This is, again, the Western media description of it. Karmapa is the second Lama in Tibet, which is not true. Often they portray him like that. But Karma, Pa is his father. Karma is action. So father of all actions. So he comes from the action family. We have 5 different families. I am of the action, like do, don't.
Right.
Yeah. So
this makes him the perfect teacher for you.
Yeah. So he was my... I found him second after Dalai Lama, but he's the knower of all times. Like he literally saved me from earthquakes, saved me from gun violence, pulled me out.
He's the one who talked you off getting on a plane,
yes.
Right? Yeah.
So he's clairvoyant.
And that you were going to Kathmandu, and that's when the earthquake was, right?
Mm-hmm. And to meet Dan.
What's that?
To meet Dan, who passed. Who was the first dead body to come.
Right. Wow.
Last
he
text
just called
to him,
you and said, don't get on the plane.
Karmapa did, yeah.
Yeah.
He knew. I didn't even tell him.
He didn't know that you were about to get on a plane. He just said, come back.
No, I was fighting with him. He said, don't go. And I said, why? I was very stubborn. Still am.
That's shocking.
But I was fighting. I was like, I'm not going to miss my flight. But also Karmapa and Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, they're both kind of similar age. So I kind of have a very friendly best friend version of it. Like not a lot of people would fight with these high lamas, but I always argue. And they kind of love it because debate is part of the Tibetan culture. I think you went and visited or saw some...
We did. We saw a debate. We got to spend a lot of time with some of the monks who I just love. I loved hanging out with those guys.
So even Dalai Lama, he would always say, come and challenge me, question me.
Yeah.
If there's part of my teaching that you don't, he told me personally, if there's anything in the text or teachings that I give, don't just believe because I'm the Dalai Lama. Question the Dalai Lama. You must question the Dalai Lama. And if it's not working for you, don't practice it. Like he would, so...
Yeah, that is part of it. I remember this debate. It was funny. It was Arthur Brooks and all these social scientists, and then you have like the
lamas.
The lamas on the other side. So we're kind of laughing the whole time. Like, you guys are so up your ass and in your head, like it was very entertaining. Actually, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to go into my teachers. We were talking about...
We were talking about how he talked you off the plane and that you have this jocular relationship with them where you push back and debate and argue.
So then he hung up when I was like, no. And then the text I got is, come see me. And then I texted Dan saying...
And you were where at this time?
Almost near the airport. So I have...
the Dharamsala airport?
No, in Bangladesh. Dhaka. So Dhaka to Kathmandu is less than an hour flight. It's like, it takes longer to get to my home in traffic than get to Nepal. It's literally like if India allowed us that 30 minutes of road on overland, it would just be a small short car ride. So I go back and I forgot where he was, and I call his assistant, and he's like, "Oh yeah, come to New York." I said, "Wait, what? He's in New York? I'm going to fly to New York to meet him?" And next day I got a Qatar flight, woke up in Qatar, like it was a layover, when my phone started, Qatar or Dubai, somewhere in those two hubs. And then my phone started beeping with messages of the earthquake. But I had a flight to catch. And by the time I landed and saw him, he was already in meditation. So when the earthquake happened, both Dalai Lama and Karmapa went into deep meditation. And, they don't say it, but they try to take on as much of the suffering that they can. And so I think it took me 3 days to see him. And by that time,
you're just hanging out in New York, waiting for him to be done meditating.
No, I knew by that time. I kind of just, because I had already gotten Dan's news, and I knew. But then when I saw him, I didn't know. Like, I was angry, but I was also, I guess, fighting with guilt, because I was recreating the whole scene of if I was there, I could have maybe saved him. He died basically in base camp doing nothing. He wasn't even climbing. And so I was replaying it, which is, again, a version of survivor's guilt, because it was his big sister. Even though he was older than me, I was like, we always watched each other out on the mountain. So, yeah, it was just, I saw him, and then I went back to Nepal from America, and I ended up staying there, and there were 360 plus aftershocks after that. So it was a very tragic time, but one of the most powerful time in my life, where we spent almost a year rebuilding. We all, from poor to rich, to all walks of life, people. And only in Nepal this could happen, coming out, living under tents, holding each other, random strangers just out in the street while the aftershocks are happening, like everyone watching out for everyone. The amount of community, collective work that happened post-earthquake. And I've been in other earthquakes. I feel like in Bangladesh, people wouldn't have behaved like that. Yeah. So just like seeing people who just lost everything, still like going and recovering, or just doing what it was necessary at that time, was very powerful.
Do the mountains still have the pull and the allure? Like, do you feel like you still have some things you want to do there? Or do you feel like you've learned what you needed to learn from those experiences?
I think till my last breath, I would want to return to the Himalayas. There's this longing of like, this is the longest time I've been away from Himalayas. My ashes are supposed to go to the Himalayas. So I have a connection there that it's more like, it's almost like therapy, like annual therapy kind of a pilgrimage. Like if I'm not in touch with the rocks and the vibration that you feel.
What is it that's so unique about the Himalayas that makes them different from other mountains, irrespective of how high they are?
They're just so alive. They're like living beings. So there's this territory within, so Everest and all these mountains, it almost like curves out in the Nepal side, like almost like an embrace, like a mother. And when you put a camp in there and sleep on the ground, let's say base camp or glacier, I'm not talking about these crazy people who are just like doing stuff, but if you're in tune with your body, you'll within 3 days, you'll be attuned with the mother. And there's a chapter in my book called Avalanche Lullaby. And it was about an episode in my life where post-Everest, I couldn't sleep anywhere. Like in Bangladesh, I had insomnia, never struggled so much with sleep. I would be up all night till I went back to base camp the next season. And, officially speaking, you're not allowed to stay in base camp without a permit. But I have enough Sherpa friends where I just put up. It wasn't sneak. It was, all the official people knew that I was coming. So, but I stayed there just to sleep. And while you're lying down, whether it's morning or evening, It just goes from... So it's like a whole layer in the embrace. There's so many big mountains, just avalanches happening. And that was so calming for me because I slept with that sound for so long. Like that became my lullaby. And it's only in that lullaby that I could fall back into sleep.
You can't fall asleep unless you're listening to avalanches.
But it was so sweet. It's not like the wrathful, even though they were wrathful, they could take in a whole village. But that sound was so pleasing. And so I felt so protected in her embrace, I would say. And also, a lot happened while I was climbing Everest. Like my entire Camp 3, which is on the Lhotse face, went off with an avalanche and right before summit push. So I had to recreate. So if people who aren't familiar with how the climb goes, you basically don't climb the mountain all at one go. You acclimatize. You go from Camp 1, Camp 2, carry. I'm talking about people who are actually carrying their shit. And then you go back, carry more stuff. But that's why it takes so long to climb these mountains. And so by the time we reached Camp 3, it was almost summit push time. And summit push time is a window. We never know when that's going to come till much later in April. And then we do several, satellite. So there are two main satellite readings that you can do, very costly. One is Swiss, one American. So I bought the American one, someone else bought the Swiss one, and then we exchanged. And anyway, long story short, I saw that there was one window on 26th. The second window on 27th was a no-go. And 25th could be a window. And if I can touch base on Camp 3. So me and Nima, we were already up there. We had our supplementary oxygen that we were going to carry to Camp 4 and then go for the summit push. Food was there. And it took weeks, it took weeks to bring them up. And then Nima just came in to the tent and it's like, Didi means sister, older sister, we're not sleeping, we're not going up tonight. So do you want to just go to Camp 2 and sleep there? Because the idea is as much as you can, you sleep at lower realms. Like there's no point losing your stuff. And I just shrugged and I don't know what. I just said, yes, let's go. And as we were rappelling down Camp 3 to Camp 2, we heard this from the top, and I thought it was an avalanche, and it was an avalanche, but it happened on another side of the mountain that made a humongous, like building-sized rock. And we're watching it come straight, took my camp, took the next camp. Two Sherpas had to be airlifted out with their backbone injury, and so my entire camp...
How long after you had left Camp 3 did that happen?
We were still on the rope, coming down. And then next day, Nima and I... when we go back to the place, because we were like, okay, if we could have, say, one oxygen cylinder or something, nothing was there. And then a cracked amulet, the one His Holiness had given me for Everest, that was just there with a crack and broken.
Everything else is gone except this amulet.
There was some like little stuff left, but the main stuff like food, oxygen, everything was taken. So I took those broken pieces and later gave it to Dalai Lama, and I was like, this happened and that happened. And then he just looked at me and he was like, time for a new one. And he went back and gave me another one.
I keep asking this question, but like, what do you make of that? Like, what does this mean to you, the way this series of events unfolded?
Well, I think that was Chomolungma's way of, because the first night that people started going up, it was a total shit show. I would have died in that line. There were over 250 attempting. I didn't make that crowd. A lot of people died in that crowd. By the time I reached, the night of me reaching the summit, I crossed over 7 dead bodies, out of which there were people from that same season who I had tea with, and those people died in the just previous summit window. So that was the time when I was like, okay, I was looking at them. But also I must say, when I went back to Camp 2, automatically it was very depressing. Like, I still didn't know if I would make it. I had to go back to base camp. My supplies came on a helicopter from Kathmandu. Me and Nima had to recarry back. Can you imagine the energy loss, the mental thing? But as soon as I reached back to Camp 2 and settled my mind, I'm going to go, I felt like someone, like a mother, a goddess, fearless energy was like, you're going to come up, and was just pulling me. We reached dead zone, dead zone starts above 26,000 feet. So Camp 3 above, technically speaking, is dead zone. You spend as less time there, and you have basically no appetite in dead zone. I went into Camp 4. I was so hungry after eating my food that I ended up eating Nima, the next camp, next tents, all the Sherpas leftover food, and everyone was like, Didi, what happened to you? Like, I had this newfound energy that I couldn't explain. And then throughout the night of climbing, I felt like someone was pulling me, like just this big energy. And it was, as cliched as it gonna sound, that climb itself was probably one of the most profound spiritual experience for me. And I'm so happy that it happened, because if I was in that shit show line before, I wouldn't be having this experience. And the other thing that happened, Nima.
But hold on a second.
Yeah.
So profound, how and why?
Because I was constantly, like, I knew Mother was there. She was protecting me. She was pulling me.
Yeah.
And then my entire life, at that time I was only 29, but my entire life flashed through the last couple of hours of reaching the summit. And everything from very life-altering moments to insignificant memories, like random people crossing in Heathrow Airport, or like just, but it was happening at a rate faster than the speed of light, like everyone just passing. But the overriding feeling throughout that was of gratitude. Like I was like bursting with gratitude. I was like, wow. And, there was this last ridge line before the summit. So I studied the mountain, obviously, like the maps. And so I knew of what was there, but you're at nighttime climbing it.
Right.
You have no concept of how high you are, how low you are. You're just going up. And then all of a sudden, from my right side, from literally below me, you know how sometimes you fly in the plane and you can see the curvature of the earth? So just like that, the curvature of the earth and the sun started coming up, and I looked down and I was like, holy shit, like how high I was. And I knew that was Tibet. So the mountain summit literally goes on the border of Tibet and Nepal. So on the summit, that side is Tibet and this side is Nepal. So I was even joking, like, with Nima, is like, oh, if you fall, like in this place, we have two countries to die in. We have a choice. If you fall on the right, you fall in Tibet. God. If you fall on the left, you die in Nepal. And Nima was like, yeah, don't fall on the right, Didi. We can't get your body out from China. So we were just joking nonstop about that. And then we finally reached the summit at the time when sunrise was happening. And I got to watch that from top of the world with Nima alone. There was no bloody single person. But I must say here, Nima, if it wasn't for Nima, he was one of the very few. There were at that time, this is 2012, he was one of the 18 Sherpa people to have learned English, and he was pursuing the international guiding certifications. He was very skilled and ahead. So he climbs like a ninja, like without rope or anything, oxygen. And he had seen what could have happened on the balcony and other places. So he brought extra rope with him, which is abnormal because the ropes are already set up. So when we hit a traffic point, he detoured me through a rope, and we basically bypassed the traffic. And that's how I could, and I was fast. And I was so surprised, like, how is this happening? It's the mother, she's the goddess of inexhaustible giving. And then I bawled my eyes out on the summit, just like, and Nima was like trying to, because like your cornea is going to freeze, like just don't cry right now. But it was just overwhelmingly, I don't think I've felt gratitude in that way ever before.
You were being looked after, and you were being looked after by the Great Mother, who was expressing love for you when you needed it most.
And then I did a naughty thing after that.
What'd you do?
So I was banned from Tibet in 2007 5 years before the climb, and it was because of a book that I was carrying. It was a meditation book called Art of Happiness with a very smiley picture of Dalai Lama. And I got caught.
That'll do it.
So the officer, he ripped it looking at me like this. And then he threw the cover like this on my face. And this is, it's a Buddhist meditation book, but it's a spiritual scripture for me. So I found it, he just literally ripped the cover with my teacher on it and threw it. And threw my passport, through the rest of the book. And the last line he said was, "You can never step into Tibet again." And I was so pissed with that line. So I carried that cover to the summit just as a backup, knowing that the border of Tibet lied over there. And after watching sunrise on top of the world, I was like, "Nima, are you ready? Do you feel good?" He's like, "I think you're doing very good. Let's go." Because, you have to also remember that summit is only half the way and you still have a mountain to go down. So we rappelled down Tibet side. And I put the cover of Dalai Lama inside Tibet. And I said, "I stepped into Tibet again." And then I gave a picture of me holding a picture of him. So there's a picture of Dalai Lama holding a picture of me, holding a picture of him inside Tibet.
That's hilarious. What was his reaction when you told him that story?
He had so much. He was like, "Wait, what did you do?" Like, he was just so shocked. But then I also took a zoom lens I took a 180 panorama in several sections as far as I could. And I also gave him that, like the view of Tibet from top of the world and just how much the glaciers have gone out. And I don't think I've ever seen Kundun this sad when he was looking at those pictures. Those are in his home, all of those. That was very sad. But yeah, that was the naughty thing I did. And then we came back.
Did he ever reflect back to you like his thoughts on what you accomplished?
Not yet.
This idea that he's like, go to the mountains, and then you go and you go to the mountains and then some, and then you go back to him. What does he say to you about like this arc?
He never takes any credit, and he doesn't, like, anytime I've gone back and said, "Remember when you told me da 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 da?" And because he counsels so many people, and also it's a very Tibetan thing to not, just everything. Don't take credit. None of my teachers ever want credit. But so I in my 20s and 30s, I had this karma with authority figures in pretty much every single country. I was getting into trouble with the army, the intelligence, and a lot of this shit show that was happening in China, inside China. And so one was concerned that this young girl is going to get into a lot of trouble and probably get killed. I already got banned and profiled. And so he was always, I was going to him for protection and said, like, "Can you do something?" Almost like, "Can you call up the gods to remove this?" So he would be very serious, and then wanting to know what happened back in Bangladesh when I would go back. And then somehow it was basically after Everest, every single politician to intelligence, they all became my friend because they had to claim me for their parties, right? And so when I went back and told him that he was just going from his home to Suklakang, which is the temple, and we met in the street, and I was like, "Holiness, there's no more trouble anymore. Like, I don't know what happened. Like, and he looked so disappointed. He made this very disappointed face. He's like, "Oh." Like, he made a disappointed face and said, "I must go back into prayer now to cause you more trouble." Because the whole concept is, if there are no obstacles, then you're not going to learn anything.
Yeah.
So what's the point?
Yeah.
But to answer your question, to go back to your question, I think my memoir would be the good way to let him know, and that because every chapter has him in some way or other. So I think I got to finish it soon and give him a copy.
The clock is ticking. You've been working on it for a while, right?
No, because I know why. Because a lot in the first book proposal I got was after Everest, when I was only 29. I'm going to be 42 this year. And my story hadn't finished at that time. So this one is now finishing at 40 when I leave for K2.
Yeah.
And that's where it should, because I hadn't gotten the healing, the mother wounding stuff we talked about. All of that work only happened in 2020.
There's so much more I want to talk to you about, but I'm going to have to release you back to your life. But I'm not going to let you go, I think, until we kind of land this. And the way I want to land it is with a little reflection on what you might be able to share about the many transformations that you've undergone. Like, somebody can look at your story and be inspired by all the things that you've overcome to achieve all the things that you've achieved. And I want to leave people with some thoughts on how they might reflect on where they are in their life and what's standing in the way of them achieving some aspiration for themselves, and how to go about perhaps manifesting that dream or that goal.
When I share my stories, I think one of the most important things for me is to really make people realize that we're all climbing our own mountains, regardless of whether we are an A-lister like we spoke about, or whatever circumstances we're in. We're all suffering and we're all climbing our own mountains. But having a purpose, having honesty, and really working at it, there's no mountain high enough for us to climb. If I could do everything that I've done from the background that I came from, anything is possible. It truly is. It's not a cliche line. But we gotta work hard for it. We really gotta be prepared and train ourselves for it. But there is a way out, and we only get one chance at this game. None of us know when we're gonna exit this planet. The likeness of me dying on a mountain is way less than me dying in the streets of, let's say, Dhaka City or LA City. I don't like civilization, and I don't function well in. But just to give that, like, we all come here for a very short time, and we must make this a very purposeful time. Don't ruin it. It's like what the Dalai Lama told me in different ways in our first meeting.
What do you say to the person who says, I don't know what my purpose is, or I don't know how to find purpose, or I know my life could be larger or more expansive, but I don't even know where to start.
Yeah, that's how I was questioning in my mind when His Holiness gave me the purpose lecture on my first meeting. But I think we all need to go on our own journey in our own ways and really dive deep into understanding what karma is. And I don't mean, again, karma is, even though the word means action, what is the purpose that we came in? But no one else can find it out for you. We all have to find it on our own terms, in our own ways. And that journey will teach you so much, like it did me. I had to find my own purpose. And oftentimes, we go through journeys and it never makes sense, but ultimately in the end, it all makes sense.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense when it's happening.
Yeah.
Later on, you look back and you're like, oh yeah, of course. But you don't get to see or have that feeling when you're in it. It's just sort of rigged that way, isn't it?
Mm.
That was beautiful.
I don't normally get to talk like this with a lot of people in LA. So
how do you feel? Do you feel like we did it? Do you feel okay?
Yeah, I think we covered a lot in the short time, but I think we could talk for days.
Yeah, I think there's more. I think we're going to have to do a part 2 at some point. Yeah. In the meantime, we can go deeper I need to go to this somatic healer.
We can do all our somatic work and come back and have a different episode on the inner work.
You really inspire me with your example. We didn't even go into all of your activism and the kind of moral compunction and ethical way that you go about showing up in the world to speak truth to power and to address the causes that are important to you. So I think that would be something we could go into next time as well. I just think it's beautiful how you do that. It's really powerful. It's inspiring as an example of service. And I'm just so glad we had a chance to meet. Thank you for what you do and for coming here today to share.
Thank you so much for having me.
And you need to get that book done. And you need to get that documentary done. right?
Yeah, we're working on it now.
Yeah, good. If people want to learn more about you, where's the best place to direct them? To your website, to your Instagram?
Yeah. I mean, I got to step up my game on Instagram. That's all my LA people are disappointed at me. But yeah, Instagram.
It's all Maya, right? It's just an illusion.
Yeah. My Instagram is Wasfia Nazreen. Website is wasfianazreen.com. Either of those. Facebook, same. Wasfia Nazreen.
People still go to Facebook?
I have
maybe globally,
so many
right?
people, huh?
Globally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, all the Nat Geo people are there. It's a different crowd.
Yeah.
But it's Instagram is short attention span. Facebook is more like long version
stuff. Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. What is the word that you use in closing that is it's not a goodbye, but it's with this word?
It's in Bengali. Ashi?
Yes, starts with an A, right? What does that mean? So
in Bengali, we have a culture of saying Ashi, like I'll be back or coming back shortly. So we don't say goodbye. We say Ashi.
All right, so let's end it with Ashi.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
You. That was great. That's it for today. Thank you for listening. I truly hope you enjoyed the conversation. To learn more about today's guest, including links and resources related to everything discussed today, visit the episode page at richroll.com, where you can find the entire podcast archive, my books, Finding Ultra, Voicing Change in the Plant Power Way, as well as the Plant Power Meal Planner at meals.richroll.com. If you'd like to support the podcast, the easiest and most impactful thing you can do is to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and on YouTube, and leave a review and or comment. This show just wouldn't be possible without the help of our amazing sponsors who keep this podcast running wild and free. To check out all their amazing offers, head to richroll.com/sponsors. And sharing the show or your favorite episode with friends or on social media is, of course, awesome and very helpful. And finally, for podcast updates, special offers on books, the meal planner, and other subjects, please subscribe to our newsletter, which you can find on the footer of any page at richroll.com. Today's show was produced and engineered by Jason Camiolo. The video edition of the podcast was created by Blake Curtis with assistance by our creative director, Dan Drake. Portraits by Davey Greenberg, graphic and social media assets courtesy of Daniel Solis. And thank you, Georgia Whaley, for copywriting and website management. And of course, our theme music was created by Tyler Pyatt, Trapper Pyatt, and Harry Mathis. Appreciate the love the support. See you back here soon. Peace. Plants. Namaste.